Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are tonight's entertainment.
You are not in Kansas anymore. You are on Pandora.
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Film Jump. I am your host, Jesse.
Co-host Chris here.
Thanks for tuning in. This is going to be episode 0, like as in ground zero. Our first episode, technically not like a full-on episode.
More of a teaser.
Yeah. -1, you can check that out as our first one. It's basically just a spoiler-free review of Godzilla -1. We're going to include a little bit of a spoiler review later on in this one, so stay tuned for that. But this is episode 0, and we kind of want to go over the foundation of why we're doing this. What qualifies us to talk about movies and why we're the experts.
Yeah.
So, Chris, we have both been into movies for a long time. We're not your average cinephile, I don't think, but we've definitely been in the game for a while, and we're both outstanding TV production student winners from high school.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We won the prestigious Golden Leopards when we were in high school. So I mean, that's pretty much the only qualification you need to be a professional podcaster.
Yeah. What else do you need to be able to talk about movies and have a qualified opinion, right? Yeah. I mean that's all you need.
We got a plaque on the wall. That's official.
Right. And as soon as the video component drops, which it will be dropping in the future, you guys will get to see that in all its glory. So today, I want to start off by talking about a little bit of news, Chris. Our first episode was about Godzilla -1. Both of us agree, amazing movie.
Fantastic.
Not only an amazing Godzilla movie, but just a really good flick all around, even for non-Godzilla fans. But we'll get into that later. But that kind of brings me into the MonsterVerse, which is the American version of all the Godzilla movies, which includes Kong. Let's talk about that, because today they just dropped some official promo pictures for some merch that you can buy, I think on Legendary or one of their websites. And it gives us a good look at King Kong, which he doesn't really have that much of an update. It didn't seem like.
Yeah, I mean, if you're really kind of side by side in it, he's got a little bit of a longer beard.
Yeah, I think his
beard's longer. And he kind of it maybe looks like they might be like tweaking like if the fur's like thinning out on the arms, but I mean that's very like you're really looking into a picture.
Yeah.
But I mean like longer beard and just like clearly like a little more older, a little more rugged. Like he's Hollow Earth warrior Kong. Still got the axe, which is awesome.
Right, he's got the axe from Godzilla versus Kong, which if you haven't seen that, definitely check it out. But Godzilla in particular, okay, quite a change now. At least if you're looking at all the way from Godzilla 2014, where this rendition was introduced, and Gareth Edwards' movie, up until now, he's only had minor changes, more or less.
Yeah.
But now he's rocking some, and this is just one little render. It could change, but
yeah.
He's rocking some like pink or red spikes. They look like they're, you know what?
I was just thinking they're Godzilla 2000 spikes, kind of. They're kind of evocative of that. Yeah, it's sort of the Godzilla design change across these movies is always kind of like, it always just like, oh, it looks like Godzilla. The first time you see it, if you're just going off memory, you're like, oh yeah, it looks like about what I think I remember him looking like in the last movies. But then if you drew the side by sides, you can see, oh, the size changes, the spines change a little bit, the sort of the feet always get kind of adjusted a little bit, things like that, and this is no different. This might be one of the most noticeable ones because the dorsal plates so far have always kind of been the sort of gray.
The fins for the normies.
Yeah, the fins, the spikes on the back, however you want to define them. They've always been kind of, for the MonsterVerse, they've been the same color as Godzilla. People joke that it's like monochromatic Godzilla, that he's got no variation to his color. These ones are different. They have kind of this more crystal look to them that yeah. Overall, the Godzilla spines were almost always a little bit of a different color scheme from his body, but these ones specifically are a little bit of the Godzilla 2000 kind of variety that have a purple, reddish, just another color going on, which is, it's cool because, Godzilla 2000 dropped in 1999 in Japan, so this is 25 years later, so like a fun little coincidental nod throwback to that kind of design.
Yeah,
I like
potentially, we'll see that.
I love pulling elements from previous, big and small nods and winks and connections to previous films and designs is always something cool.
Yeah, what's cool about the design that I noticed is it almost looks like the new spines are are kind of growing through like the old ones, or maybe they get destroyed. We don't know. I'm
Yeah.
trying to avoid spoilers.
Yeah,
for
almost
sure.
like maybe like breaking through a cocoon kind of thing. Like the crust, like they had like the crusty layer, and it was covering the real spines underneath, like years and years of sort of like growth or what have you.
Have you ever seen the pictures of like elk or some animals? They shed their antlers and it's almost a bright red.
Yeah,
it
yeah,
kind of looks like that.
That's that sort of thing, and Godzilla is that kind of creature that's like perpetually sort of evolving, growing, healing, transforming. So it's all in the ballpark, and I think it's could be a good look, and this is pure theory. We are not people that do go into any of the leaks, so anything you hear us theorizing about the movie, it's pure theory. We don't have inside information on anything. It's just hopes and dreams.
And here's the thing: we're going to look at the promo images and the trailers also.
Yeah,
but
that's not spoilers.
Sometimes they give away a little much. One of the images in particular is it looks like Godzilla is in like this crystalline ice-like structure.
Yeah, maybe
underneath.
frozen.
Yeah, and immediately I start speculating. Well, and hopefully this isn't what happens.
Yeah.
They pull like Transformers 2 Revenge of the Fallen where Godzilla gets taken out early on and then he's got to recuperate and then bring him out in the final act.
Yeah, are we going to get like Godzilla getting put literally on ice in the first third of the movie and then not coming back to the final third? Like, it's like, look, like you're never going to have 100% equal screen time for Kong and Godzilla in a movie like this. Like, it's always going to be a balance, and Kong's got a more dramatic angle to him. He's more connected to humans, so
for sure,
no qualms about Kong getting a little bit more focus in a movie like this. But you just hope that you're not, when you watch the movie, that you're not feeling like, wow, Godzilla kind of got put on the back burner for a little bit. Like, this is Godzilla's 70th anniversary movie. I know officially -1 was counted by Toho as the 70th anniversary movie, but this is the one actually coming out. So it's like, we can at least hope that, if nothing else, Godzilla will absolutely dominate the third act of the movie. At least maybe that.
Well, and here's the thing also is, just from what I've read on X, formerly known as Twitter, is it's an evolve, like almost like he's going Super Saiyan maybe.
Yeah, which I'm all for. Like, I kind of want some of that bonkers anime, larger than life kind of energy being brought here. Power ups and super beams and things like that. Like, break out the super atomic breath that we saw in the 90s. They did the atomic pulse in King of the Monsters when he was supercharged. Like, have him have some kind of power up form that he can go into. Like that's how you make these things dynamic and have levels to this and show increases and changes in powers and abilities. So lean into that, dude. Why not?
For sure. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be awesome because we're as we said in our first episode -1, we are diehard Godzilla fans. That means we're a little biased, but there's a flavor of Godzilla movie for every person out there. We talk about that all the time.
Yeah,
but
and if you not to do this, I hate the whole like real fans this, real fans that, but it's like you can't be like, oh, well, I'm a Godzilla fan and like you're only a specific fan of a very specific kind of thing. It's like there's too much Godzilla to kind of say that you're a Godzilla fan, but you have this like great hatred for certain styles and types. It's like learn to like it all, or at least learn to put up with it all, because there's a shoe for every foot,
Right. And here's the thing: we'll get more into how we judge or critique movies here in a little bit, and how they're like experiences, and that's how we rate them. But I do have to mention that there's this guy, I forgot the name, and maybe it's good that we don't even bring up his handle, but. Mm-hmm. He was on X just getting absolutely destroyed by Godzilla fans for bringing down the Rotten Tomatoes from 100% down to like 97 or 98.
Oh, yeah,
He's like the only one out there to give it -1, like a negative review. And he goes out and says something to the effect of, even though Godzilla 1998, Roland Emmerich's first, the first American version, how bad that was, he would still rather watch that. And of course, liking movies is a very subjective thing.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that too. But at the same time,
and I think some of the issue a little bit was that like it wasn't so much like a negative review, but it's like he's gonna do a negative review, and then like the first 10 seconds of his video is like he picks out the kind of widely regarded worst one and be like, I would rather watch that crap than this. It's like, dude, it's like are you did you genuinely not like the movie and you're giving an honest review, or are you trying to do this thing where he's getting exactly what he asked for, which is a lot of attention, a lot of hate, and now everyone's got this whole... That's why I did not feed into it at all, because I'm like, dude, it's like this dude is going for the hate clicks, so it's like it's like whatever.
Well,
dude.
And then this guy also came out with
he plays
another video. Look how
to respond.
I was.
Yeah. It's like, dude, this is exactly what he wanted.
Well, look, more power to him. If whatever he's doing to grow his channel, he's going to do that. We're not going to get into that.
Yeah, do your thing, man.
So we'll cover a little bit more news, and then we'll get into some stuff that I think that relates a little bit. Let's switch gears to back in 2004, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I will correct you if you're wrong.
Will Smith dropped I Am Legend.
2007.
2004
was I, Robot. 2007 was I Am Legend.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of years there where Will Smith was considered the king of the box office.
Will Smith was hot. Like, if you everyone saw the new Will Smith movie whenever Will Smith movie came out. Yeah. You had stuff like Wild Wild West when we were real little kids, but like there's a period of time there where like a new Will Smith movie dropped, you saw it. Like that was just what you did. And
here's the thing, he had, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but like 6 or 7 movies that all went 100+ million at the North American, like the domestic box office, and it was ruined by his second movie after The Pursuit of Happiness. He collaborated with the same director.
Was it 7 pounds?
7 pounds.
Okay, yeah.
That killed his streak, and then he had the most,
because he was also, I remember I read this one interview where he was big on I just want my movie to always open at number 1. He's like, I never like to see that we didn't open at number 1. He's like, I like having that cachet, and I think 7, but it's like when you explore dramas and things, it's like you can't always bring the blockbuster appeal. Like, people love you in every blockbuster under the sun, but it's like you're not always going to get everyone to watch any drama you're in and then put 50 million in the bank in the opening weekend, But it's like, he was on a, I like thinking of the 2000 to 2010 era Will Smith, because those were much better days for that gentleman. I'm not here to bag on anybody.
That goes without saying.
But he had a great run there. But yeah, 2007 I Am Legend, loved that movie when it came out.
So I guess he just did a little interview and said that they just got the script in, and that he was talking to Michael B. Jordan. Don't know what his role will be, but he said that they're working on the second one, and that they're going with the alternate ending. He said the DVD,
this?
But
if I remember correctly, Will Smith's character blows himself up at the end
Spoiler
of I Am
alert.
Legend or something. It's been a couple years, but yes, there is the DVD extended alternate cut of the movie.
We don't talk about DVD now. We're on to Blu-rays.
That does, yeah. I hope to God that the Blu-ray isn't one of those things where like only the theatrical version.
No,
on the Blu-ray,
I have the Blu-ray. It's
and
on
it has
the Blu-ray.
because it has the alternate ending.
The 4K UHD does not have
4K is theatrical.
It does not have.
So this isn't a sequel to the 4K disc. It's a sequel to the Blu-ray.
For all the physical media lovers out there, the 4K disc does not have the alternate ending, which is now considered the canonical ending.
Start the petition, because it was an alternate ending. There's like one deleted scene they add in, and it sort of rounds out this kind of subplot that they build up, which is the cure working. And he, in the alternate ending, instead of doing like the cure's in her blood, he gives it to the lady and the son. He sends them away, sacrifices himself, blows himself up, blows the bad guys up, and then they get away. Yeah, I mean, total spoilers. Sorry, the movie's like 15, 16
Everybody
years old.
remembers it as the movie where he kills his own German Shepherd.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's zombies.
Which is more gut-wrenching than his death at the end of the movie. But then the alternate ending, he survives, and he sort of makes a semi-peace. He realizes that the bad guy of the movie is coming after him the whole movie because he took his woman, and he gives his woman back.
The bad zombie.
Yeah, the bad zombie, bad
infected.
Vampire zombie infected thing. And so like he kind of like gives her back, and then he just leaves off with I think he doesn't take the cure though. That's the thing. He realizes she's cured, but he reinfects her and gives her back. That was that ending. That was like the bittersweet nature of that ending.
But I think it still works to where he
No, he didn't leave with the cure. Oh. That's the bittersweet nature.
Leave us a comment below.
Fact check. My memory's only so good, but I believe that's what
we're not looking these things up as we do this.
Yeah,
recording.
I believe that's what the ending of that was, and so. But he rides off into the sunset with the lady and the son, and no cure, I believe.
And personally, I think either ending works. With I'll give a little bit more favor to the alternate ending, which apparently they like it too.
I remember I liked the theatrical cut when it came out because like 300 was that year, Beowulf was that year. It was a big year for like the hero sacrifices himself at the end movie. So I just thought that like a real movie, that's like what a real movie does, you know? And so like I was, and I think No Country for Old Men, but like in a different way. And so I was really like into that ending. And the other one just felt like kind of like a little chintzy, but it's like everyone was like, well, the other ending, they could have made a sequel to it. And look what happens. They're now making a sequel to the alternate ending.
Well, that's kind of like a decent segue into our next little segment here. Let's talk about how... Now, this has been a thing for Hollywood forever now, is where they'll make something, and you either get a sequel, it's franchised, or it's not. And then 10 years later, 15 years later, 20 years later, then they go and revitalize that same franchise or same movie or whatever.
You're talking about bringing up like a long dormant one.
And they'll do like a legacy sequel.
Yeah, that's exactly the term. People call them legacy sequels, because everyone has to have a buzzword. I always liked calling them long distance sequels because it's like it's kind of very specific to what they are. It's like people are always like, oh, soft reboot. It's like soft reboot means anything these days. It's like
right.
It's like a long term sequel. You come back like 20 years later and make a sequel.
Yeah. Well, maybe not a good segue, but a little company that hasn't had to do one, they haven't had to make a legacy sequel, is because they've been a long time running now, is the MCU.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to talk about that, and also like the current state of the box office and everything, kind of let you guys know where we sit in regards to that and what our thoughts are.
Yeah.
The MCU, like everybody else, we started off, I think, as pretty big fans. We were in high school when Iron Man came out.
Yep.
Or right before high school. One of those.
It was 2008. We were 2008. Sophomores, and we all saw the Thursday night preview. We had like 3 rows filled with a bunch of people from our class for the Thursday night preview. It was one of those things. Was like, oh, you're going? Oh, we'll go. We all went to the 8 p.m. Thursday show on the East Coast. So like technically, some of the earliest crowds in America watching Iron Man. Just want to say that. And so we were on board.
We were the first.
We saw the post-credit scene. We were there 7 p.m. on the Thursday before it came out. And we all loved it,
Everybody did.
Yeah. Is there anyone that watches the first Iron Man and is like, that movie's terrible? It's like, no, that's a really good movie. Sorry.
And not to branch off off topic here, but around that same time, and you'll give me the date, I know you will, is we also had the Dark Knight. So comic book fans were feasting.
May, the very first weekend of May was Iron Man. June was The Incredible Hulk, which had the cameo from Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, which was the first time anything like that had ever really been done in a big blockbuster movie. And then July was The Dark Knight. I remember like everyone was super high on Iron Man, and then The Dark Knight came out. They're like, oh yeah, that totally crushed Iron Man.
This is cinema.
Yeah, didn't end that franchise at all. The MCU sort of like, in some ways won the long game, in some ways kind of has lost the long game.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah, let's talk about winning and losing.
2008, The Dark Knight won.
So yeah, the MCU, and I'm sure you could go on X and see a lot about the debates between good old Martin Scorsese and a lot of the fans on what is cinema and what's not.
That's a debate that has changed. Like when Martin Scorsese was to kind of take the timeline here. So 2008, the MCU launches, and 2008, The Dark Knight comes out. You ask anyone in 2008 which one they prefer, everyone's saying The Dark Knight. But in 2012, you ask everyone which they prefer between The Avengers and The Dark Knight Rises, almost everyone is saying The Avengers.
Yeah, same.
And then kind of the MCU was kind of just in cruise control there. Christopher Nolan didn't do any more Dark Knight movies. Zack Snyder, maybe that's a whole different side of the conversation. But the MCU was hot for 10 years, basically. From the Avengers all the way through to Endgame. It was
changed the industry.
Super, super hot. Yeah, everyone was emulating the shared universe, the franchise, the spin-off show, the tie-ins, the versus movies. Everybody was doing that. When Civil War came out, you then had Optimus Prime and Bumblebee fighting in the next Transformers movie, and Vin Diesel and The Rock fighting in the 8th Fast and Furious movie. Like, even Civil War was kind of like...
And a little plug for the Snyderverse here, Batman vs. Superman.
Batman vs.
However, we'll talk about that later.
Exactly. We'll tie that in later.
That's a different topic.
That debate is for another day. And so, MCU was hot. After Endgame, a lot of people, I feel like, kind of felt like that was it. That was like the Return of the King moment. Like, bow out, made nearly $3 billion.
And maybe that moment also could be with Spider-Man as well. Some people will cut it off there.
Yeah. That was gonna say, like, most people will say, well, if you're gonna go past Endgame, watch Spider-Man, Far From Home and No Way Home, because they bring back Tobey, they bring back Andrew, they do the whole 3 Spider-Man thing, and it's really awesome, and it's a great send off, and that's a good farewell point as well. But since then, the sort of general thesis is, I'm not here to really get into my opinions of it, but like generally, the quality seems to have gone down, and the reception seems to be a lot less positive, and the box office performances of these movies is nowhere near as strong.
I mean, Chris, this is why we're doing a podcast, to give our opinions.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. The MCU, everybody loved it when it started off, but I think I feel like you and I, and unfortunately we can't back this up unless you go follow us on X and find our tweets from way back then.
Sure.
So unless you do that, we can't really back up what we're saying. But you and I think, kind of fell off the wagon with the MCU, and not so much superhero movies, but just the whole thing quite a while ago. And now it seems like
Everyone's caught up.
And the general audience, post Disney Plus launch, post Endgame, is basically right where we've been at since Endgame as well.
Yeah, I remember leading up, like, I was in it up through Endgame, like, positive, but I was like, I'd seen every single one of these ones in theaters. I did not see Ant-Man and the Wasp in theaters, and I did not see Captain Marvel in theaters. I was like, I know enough about those that I'm not gonna... They didn't feel like required reading when they came out, and that was the first time that I felt like I didn't need to see one of these movies in the theaters.
Right.
But I saw Endgame, and Endgame felt like a satisfying, proper conclusion. And then I watched, Spider-Man No Way Home. That was the last one that I paid to see in a theater. All the other ones since, I've kind of like... I've eventually seen them, but like... not really thought of them nearly as hot. But yeah, I was kind of like, I was ready for Endgame to come and be like, all right, can we be done? Can we move on? Like, give us the Return of the King moment. Like I love the Lord of the Rings, but it's like, I wouldn't have been excited to hear like that there was like 5 other Lord of the Rings movies coming after Return of the King. Like, tell your story and let your story end. That's a whole different, like, when a company is making a franchise versus when a storyteller is telling a story, it's a totally different thing, because a storyteller knows when they want to end a story. A company, as long as they're making money, they see no reason to stop making a product. They don't have a sort of a shred of like narrative dignity or sense about them.
They have shareholders.
Exactly. They don't have emotions. They have profits. Like they're like if they're making money, they just logically, we make money. We're here to make money. This is making money. Why would we not stop unless it stops making money? They don't have a bit of like, well, the story needs to end here and we'll have a great legacy if we end the story. They're like, does legacy make us money every year? No, it doesn't. A new movie makes us money every year. So.
Well, and to quote one of the Marvel movies, Vision from Age of Ultron, what does he say at the end there? So, something isn't beautiful because it lasts, or something to that effect.
Yeah, life isn't... Yeah, something about... I haven't seen Age of Ultron in many years, but, a thing isn't special because it lasts. It's a privilege to be among them, And so... And Tony Stark in Endgame says, part of the journey is the end. Every story is kind of decided whether it's good or not based on the ending. You have some movies and stories that are totally horrible because of how they end, So... It's like, if you can't commit to the ending, you're just going to go on and on. You're going to kind of deplete yourself.
Well, and I think it's a good segue into like box office and like how we personally, at least how I personally judge movies. Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to get into that. The box office is, for the Marvel movies specifically, because not everything, but has been tanking.
Yeah.
And you could say, is this a Disney problem? Is it superhero fatigue? Is it this? And I think it's a combination of a lot.
I think the answer to that is yes. Yeah. Like, that's the thing. It's like... I'm not here to say, oh, people are boycotting. What is a boycott anyway? It's just it's people voting with their dollars for sure. There's money that used to be spent like crazy on these movies, and it's not being spent on them anymore.
Well, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, we can rip our hair out over, oh, what is it? Is it a political thing? Is it just fatigue? Is it this? Is that? Like, again, we're not here to solve the math problem of exactly why or what percentage of the people didn't see it for what reason, who knows what, economy, this or that or the other. There's 1.5 million excuses you could throw out, but the bottom line is that these things used to print money and they are no longer printing money, and that's big.
Well, I think an obvious answer is they don't value the theatrical experience anymore. And I think that is a good segue into what...
Disney, you mean, or people?
Disney. I'm sorry, Disney, yeah. The executives, the producers, the people behind the scenes... specifically Disney, I'm sure there are others out there, Warner Brothers, that they are devaluing the theatrical experience. And so for me, this is why I love a movie. And yes, it is a subjective thing. So right now, you and I can rip on or talk negatively about the latest Marvel movie, but it is subjective at the end of the day, and if somebody else loves it, good for them.
And here's the thing, full disclosure, I watched the trailer for the Marvels. I'm not interested in watching that movie. I don't need to see that movie to then come back and say, yeah, it was definitely not for me like I thought it was from the trailers. I'm not going to see it, so I can't say like, oh, I saw it, and here's all the 80 things I didn't like about it. Look, I saw the trailers. Trailers didn't look good. I don't see a movie that I think genuinely doesn't look like I'm going to be into it.
Right.
So there you go.
And here's the thing.
And I have not heard much to the contrary to prove me wrong.
Right. As movie podcasters / reviewers that we are, you might say, well, you guys should be going to see as much as you can. That way you can give us your opinion or whatever. Here's the thing. Our opinion is that. It's just our opinion.
Yeah.
If you watch a trailer for the Marvels, because you brought that up,
Yeah.
and you really want to see that,
Knock yourself out.
go see it. Go
Yeah.
see it. I think there needs to be more. People need to be able to recognize this is a movie I really, really want to see, and then maybe you can say, let me take into account these reviews, whether they're positive or negative.
And look, there's the folks on YouTube that their whole thing is like, look, this is gonna be awful. I'm gonna review it because I have a big viewership base that wants me to review it and wants me to either heap praises on it or tear into it. Like it's part of the sort of economics of how the channel's working. They're giving their fans what they want. If you have a million people saying, hey, go see this movie, we want you to go see it, we want to hear what you have to say about it, I can understand that.
Right.
But it's like, I just know myself enough to know that when I see enough of a movie, I can kind of tell, like, am I in the market for that or am I not in the market for that? Like, The Marvels is not the kind of movie that I'm necessarily the moviegoer that's made for. Just like I'm not going to watch, like, Barbie's not really my cup of tea. I know enough to know that I'm probably not going to like it, and I'm probably not really the target audience. When I feel overtly like I'm not really the target audience, I'm not really going to go out of my way to see a movie.
Right. And especially when, like I said, the studios are devaluing the theatrical experience. You have outliers, and Barbie is one of those outliers where it's like the perfect,
Storm.
it's perfect storm of events happening, especially with Oppenheimer. And let's not undervalue the Barbie brand. Is a huge brand.
Yeah, and it was on brand from what I understand. It's a girly brand, and it's a girly movie with a lot of things about it. You got Ryan Reynolds with his abs, and it's very pink and pretty, and it was like a girls' night out kind of a movie. Not knocking that at all. Those things are allowed to exist. That's great. But it's like, you don't got a bunch of bros that are going out and be like, Barbie dude, Barbie man, that's the thing to see. Like,
Yeah, the girls drag their boys to go see Barbie, and the boys drag their girls to go see Oppenheimer.
Exactly.
So, and here's the thing. If that movie, you take the ingredients of that movie, the director Greta Gerwig, and you have the star of the movie, Margot Robbie. Thank you.
Gorgeous.
And you take those two. Let's say they make a movie not called Barbie with Ryan. Let's throw Ryan Reynolds in there as well.
Yeah.
Does it? What does that do?
Exactly. It's the full mix.
Or Ryan Gosling.
It's the
I'm
brand.
sorry.
Like, just like you say Barbie movie. It's like, well, okay, Barbie movie, but it's like, okay, Barbie movie with, this what almost happened. Amy Schumer playing Barbie or Margot Robbie playing Barbie. That did almost happen, yeah. It was going to be this weird subversive thing. And that's what we kind of mean when we talk about, like, on brand. It's like, oh, is Amy Schumer going to be like the normie Barbie that's like, oh, the message of this movie is that you don't have to be pretty and meet the Barbie norms and whatever. Like I said, so it's like, I don't think that's a very on-brand kind of Barbie movie to make. I don't think you would have had droves and droves of women teaming up to all watch Amy Schumer doing the Barbie thing. Like, I don't think that works. You say Barbie, Margot Robbie, you're like, yeah, that's
she
kind
is,
of like...
people think she's the Barbie,
like,
since Wolf of Wall
like,
Street.
That's hand in glove, and then you're like, oh, Ken. It's like, oh, were they going to do something like weird and subversive and make like Seth Rogen or something? It's like, no you
Ryan
go Ryan
Gosling,
Gosling and he's got his abs out half the movie and all the trailers. It's like lean into the brand, be on brand. They make the Mario movie and it like checks every box of what a Mario movie should be, right. It's like, and so with these Marvel movies, it's like, again, what is the brand? I don't know. It's anything and everything it wants to be, I suppose, but it doesn't feel like they're really servicing the audience that was showing up for these movies on a very consistent basis anymore.
Well, and not to mention, we could do a whole episode about the barrier for entry for the Marvel Cinematic Universe now is that you can't just watch 5 movies and watch the Avengers now. You have to watch 3, 4, 5 shows, and what is it like? 50 hours plus of stuff just to be kind of knowing what's going on. That's not...
Yeah, really quick shorthand. If you were 15 going on 16 in 2008 and Iron Man came out, you just had to go watch Iron Man and convince your buddies to see it. 4 years later, when the Avengers comes out in 2012, you had 5 movies to catch up on if you wanted to watch everything to get you set up for the Avengers. That's a 1 or 2 movie night marathon, 5 movies that you had to watch. And really, you could probably get away with just 4 of the 5 movies. You could leave the Incredible Hulk out and you'd probably still be good to go for the Avengers. Fast forward now, if you're a 15, 16-year-old now, born in 2008, and the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe is played out in your lifetime, and you're now that high school kid that is supposed to be the market for these blockbusters, you've got 30 plus movies. Once you factor in that now they're bringing in the X-Men movies, now they're bringing in the Spider-Man movies as part of this multiverse, and all the Disney Plus shows, it's probably like hundreds of episodes of Marvel TV at this point if you add it all up, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all that nonsense.
Especially now that they're bringing back in all the Fox characters.
Yeah, and the Netflix shows and characters are now semi-canon, multiversal canon, whatnot. It's like, it is a mountain of stuff. It's like, what 15 or 16-year-old would even, find, like, you see and hear about that. If you weren't already engaged, I don't see how you get on board.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure, because we don't want to discredit all the people out there who are huge fans of it. And, like the younger kids, for a kid in middle school and high school, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I'm sure, is still very awesome.
Yeah, and I'm sure, because I was the kind of kid that would binge epic franchises and stuff. It's like maybe a dedicated 16-year-old over summer break could be like, dude, I'm watching nothing but Marvel this whole summer, and I'm on board, and I'm loving it all. Yeah, that exists, but that's not going to be the norm. That's not going to be the standard.
That's the exception, not the rule.
Exactly. And what you were talking, you mentioned like devaluing the theatrical experience.
Let's talk about that.
When we were back from COVID, Disney kind of had this habit where they would drop a movie like Encanto into theaters. And when it kind of very underperformed in theaters, again, you could say coming back from COVID, you could just say families weren't ready to go back to theaters. Again, not here to necessarily poll the entire audience to find out why you didn't see Encanto in theaters, but the long story short, it wasn't a theatrical hit, and then within a month, when Christmas rolled around, their big Christmas thing was that they dropped Encanto right onto Disney Plus within a month of it being debuted in theaters. Mm-hmm. And so things like that happened. Turning Red was going to be a theatrical movie, and I'm pretty sure shortly before it was going to hit theaters, they just said, oh no, it's a Disney Plus movie now. It's not theatrical.
Right.
And I think they were afraid of it not performing well in theaters, and so they just went straight to Disney Plus with it. They did a few Pixar movies where they just kept putting them straight to Disney Plus, foregoing theaters entirely. So you trained audiences a little bit. They're like, oh, a lot of these movies are going straight to Disney Plus, and then the ones that are hitting theaters, if they bomb, they hit Disney Plus faster. So if we're already subscribed to Disney Plus and we're mommy, daddy, multiple kids, if we hold out and skip this big $40, $50, $60 trip to the theater, maybe the next month when Christmas rolls around, they're just going to drop this thing on the streaming platform anyway. We can all watch it at home. Like, that's a different kind of training of the audience. It's not streaming versus theatrical. It's this weird thing where it's like, are you telling people that if you skip it in theaters, you will get it very quickly on Disney Plus? Mm-hmm. And, so it's like that also teaches people as well. It's like, well, if Wish flops, we'll probably get it on Disney Plus for Christmas. It's like that's a weird kind of dichotomy to juggle. Even if they're unintentionally devaluing the theatrical experience, they're still doing it. And I don't think it's entirely intentional. Right. I do think that it's they're trying to navigate COVID. They were trying to navigate COVID the best they could. How do you mitigate that? You can't have all these big theatrical releases that normally would have made hundreds of millions and just say, oh, well, they're just going straight to streaming. You're not going to keep, the audience that comes to see one movie in theaters will pay to see another movie in theaters. But once you're subscribed to Disney Plus, you're just subscribed. So it's not like you're getting a whole swath of new subscribers every time you drop a new movie. The new movies help you keep the subscribers you have. So it's a whole different kind of economic model. And I'm not here to say that the blueprint of how to manage it is laid out perfectly, but Disney certainly doesn't seem to have found that right formula. And I don't know if anyone truly has, but each their own. Yeah, and I agree with that totally. They are training the people, the audience, to say, look, sorry you didn't turn out now. We'll give it to you later. Yeah. And that's the thing, because for me and you, and I think most film buffs out there and cinephiles alike, the theatrical experience is a sacred one. Yep. And I'm going to give you my opinions on the theatrical experience. So films in general, as I said, are subjective. You can critique them objectively based on craft and certain things like that, like VFX work and, stuff, whatever. But for the most part, on the whole, they are subjective experiences. The experience is subjective. So when I go see a movie in the theater, if I have an amazing experience, whether or not the movie is a 10 out of 10, doesn't matter. If the experience is a 10 out of 10,
then for me that movie is basically a 10 out of 10. And that number can change. It can go down and it can go back up.
And a poor theater experience can damage an otherwise better movie.
Exactly.
When I saw The Curious Case of Benjamin Button in theaters, not that I would call that a 10 out of 10 movie, but that's a pretty solid movie. I haven't watched it in years, but like that's not a bad movie.
David Fincher, it's a great movie.
But where we sat in the theater was like right under wherever this AC system would kick on and off sporadically, and I was getting hit with the extremely cold air every like 20 minutes, and you'd hear it kick on. So it's like, and that's like it's close to 3 hour movie. So it's just this very sort of like, all I think about when I think about Benjamin Button is like, I was like getting frozen every 20 minutes watching the movie. And it's like, that's not the kind of movie you want to get pulled out of.
Right.
You know, it's like, you know, you miss out that experience. So it's like, but that was a very good movie though. So.
Well, in a recent example, you and I just got out of our second screening of Godzilla -1.
Yep.
We'll talk more about this spoiler, review here at the end of this one. We'll let you know when that's coming in. If you haven't seen it already, you don't have to listen to that. But we're watching that, and right now, a very, in my opinion, an unfortunate thing is a second concert movie is now playing in theaters right after Taylor Swift made just a ton of money.
Yeah.
Going to the movie theaters to see a concert movie, look, I'm okay with it.
Look, if it was one of my favorite bands doing it, I'd be inclined to maybe check it out.
Especially if you can't actually go to that concert.
Exactly. I'm just not in the market for Taylor Swift and Beyonce concerts in a movie theater.
Right. The downside is, unfortunately, Beyonce's movie has taken not quite all of them.
Most of the IMAX and large format screens
from
Godzilla.
All the premium large format stuff. So we were in the middle of the movie, and during the quiet, somber scenes,
we're hearing the Beyonce concert movie in the adjacent auditorium, and there were some moments where I was like, is this part of the score for like? I was like, I don't think it's part of the score
in the
for
background.
This movie. Yeah, it wasn't as crazy as I'm sure some people are thinking it was, but you could feel like some of the bass and some of the stuff going on.
Because it's a concert, it's often. It happens often, and I'm like,
I have a bit of a funny story that goes back to Godzilla 2014 about that one. So Godzilla 2014 came out at the same time as a little movie called The Fault in Our Stars, and so I had two buddies that this wasn't my theater experience, but two buddies that they went on a double date to go see. They saw The Fault in Our Stars with these girls, and it was that's like a drama romance kind of movie, and it was like a very, very quiet, somber moment in it, and you could hear the huge epic Godzilla roar from the very next theater over, like the sort of like the high, the big master roar that he does at the end of the movie, and they're like, it's right near like this very sad climactic moment of all our stars. They're like we just couldn't help but like burst out laughing. It's like totally like buzz killed the moment, but it's like that's kind of cool. I heard stories from people that used to work at the theater that I worked at, but they were there when Godzilla 2014 came out, and they're like, we opened the doors for the exit at the end of the movie a few minutes before the movie ends, and they're like, we always knew when Godzilla was about to end because you could like hear that big roar from down the hall, so we knew it had like 10 minutes left. I'm like, that's pretty awesome.
Well, and to combat that, you just go see your favorite movie in IMAX, so where it's so stinking loud,
you're not
just
hearing
can't hear anything else.
Yeah, your ears are popping.
Like Oppenheimer. My gosh, that was a loud movie.
Yeah.
So another thing that I think ruins the theatrical experience, and now I am very passionate about this. Couple of rules, if you will. Okay?
Best practices.
Yeah. Look, before the movie starts, during previews, if you got to go on your phone, go on your phone.
Put your stuff on silent.
Yeah, put it all on silent. Maybe turn that brightness down. Yeah. Because it's pretty dark in there.
That way, at least if you get the emergency and you got to pop the phone out, you're at least not like lighting up the sun inside the theater. Yeah.
Right. Another thing, if you cannot get somebody to watch your infant. Or your child that is too young to go to the movies, you do not get to go to the movies.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Look.
I'm sorry, it's a bullet you have to bite. But when The Dark Knight came out, we saw it opening night, and there was a guy there, recognized his buddy there, and he goes, "Oh, dude, where's whoever?" Referring to his wife. He goes, "Oh, she's at home with the kid, and then tomorrow I'm staying at home with the kid, and she's coming to see the movie."
Good practice.
I was like, what a great solution. Like, you can't see the movie together, but it's like you're also not dragging the little one. It's like the little one don't want to be there. Y'all don't want to be fussing about the little one there. Neither of you want to step out when the kid's crying. No one wants your crying kid in the theater. It's like no one's happy when that happens. You know, it's like come up with a solution. There's solutions out there.
Yeah. So for me, the theater is a sacred place. It's like my church, and I don't want that people pay a premium price for a premium experience.
Yeah.
And you're not going to ruin it with stuff like that where it can be helped.
Yep. Don't desecrate the holy temple, you know?
Yeah. Get your feet off the back of that chair.
Yeah.
You know, pick up your trash.
Yeah.
Respect it a little bit. That way we can keep going.
Yeah.
And another thing is, again, with the phone, you know, I think I took my little ones to go see a movie not too long ago. I won't get into what it is right now, but it was definitely a children's movie. And there was a guy sitting in front of us, literally on a dating app, swiping right,
Wow.
screen brightness all the way up. And I'm like,
Was he alone?
no. First of all, he's sitting like right in front of the screen, so he's like got the giant screen experience, you know, the opposite of the nosebleeds. And he's sitting there like swiping right, then he's going to text and I just want to like throw my popcorn
That's
at this guy.
hilarious.
Like, dude,
That's funny.
your phone is brighter than this screen.
I had a coworker tell me that he took his daughter to go see Wish, and he's like, yeah, I fell asleep in the movie and my daughter like told me I was snoring, like woke me up, be like, Daddy, you're snoring, you know, like, you know, it happens.
No.
Yeah, it happens, you know, but
Yeah, so the that's how I feel about the theatrical experience rather. And talking about excuse me, movies and how I rate them, I will always have my favorites, some that don't waver, they don't change. For example, I'll say right now, my favorite movie of all time, and it hasn't changed, and it probably never will, is Steven Spielberg's classic 1993 Jurassic Park.
yeah, you know,
In my opinion, subjective.
yeah, it's not a bad choice at all. I mean,
It's
there's times where I would always name it as my number one too, as my default.
Yeah, in my opinion, it's a perfect blockbuster. You know, it's got everything, and it's a classic like Spielberg Amblin type movie. That's my favorite movie of all
I think
time.
it's peak Spielberg. I definitely prefer. I'm one of those. You know, he did Jurassic Park and Schindler's List the same year, like
Amazing year.
as like a great sort of. That's a great encapsulation of the versatility he has. I'm a Jurassic Park Spielberg kind of guy. I'm like on that side of the fence of like that's the kind of like the big adventurous, whimsical, awe-inspiring thrill ride sort of adventure stories. That's the kind of cinema that I go in for. I can go into the dark stuff. I can appreciate that stuff, but it's like I kind of like that sort of fun, magic sort of kind of experiential stuff. And so,
Well, yeah, and we talk about rewatchability sometimes.
yeah,
You know, to me, a favorite movie is one that I can turn it on and you know, I call it the remote dropper.
Yep.
If it's on TV, you drop the remote, you watch it.
Yep.
Another reason is, you know, you kind of more or less have the same experience that you had when you kind of first watched it. Maybe not as grand.
Yeah.
Maybe not, you know, less endorphins.
Yeah,
but
the first time you see a movie, like you can't get that back. You know, you can watch a movie as many times as you want, but that first experience is always very special. It's because that's the, you know, where ideally you have no idea what's happening, so
Right.
you're along for the ride. So I'm always gonna vouch for the idea that the first time you should see a movie should be in the biggest, best
right.
conditions possible, because that's the one that's going to stick with you. Like,
For sure.
You remember being in the seat as that crazy thing happened or that awesome thing happened. I remember being the third row from the front during the midnight showing of the Avengers, and they do the big 360 shot and it's the Avengers assembled, and
Epic.
you know, and it's like that's a great moment. It's like, say what you want about the franchise, good, bad, has it aged poorly, has it not aged poorly, we can have all those talks, but like that's an epic cinematic moment, an epic moment at the movies that's like you don't forget it.
Right. You know, and that's another reason why I like to go to the movies is it is like going to church. You know, you go for that experience per se, and that dedication, and to be transported and sometimes even transformed.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's not that radical. Maybe you're
Yeah.
just going to go see a movie and have a laugh or
Yeah.
be thrilled, and that's okay too. But for me, I go to the movies to watch something that I can't see in real life. You know, when I was younger and first saw Jurassic Park, and then going on to the first movie I saw in theaters, and this is giving you my age here, and we're both children of the 90s.
Yeah.
But my first theatrical experience that I can remember is going to see The Lost World Jurassic Park, because I love Jurassic Park so much. And I'm seeing these dinosaurs on screen, this revolutionary VFX at the time.
Yeah.
And I think the magic is real. This is real.
Yeah.
A huge dinosaur nerd growing up, and now I'm seeing them on screen.
It just looks real. Yeah. I don't know if I feel like I definitely was taken to a movie before The Lost World, but as far as like a memory of waiting in line and then going into the movie and watching the movie, that is the first crystal one that I have, is The Lost World. Like, I'm sure maybe, because Independence Day was the year before, Toy Story was the year before that. Like, I'm sure as a little toddler I was taken to kiddie movies. I just don't have, but I remember waiting in line, like, being told, like, yeah, we're waiting in line to go watch Jurassic Park, like, being excited and watching that movie in the theater. I remember that very distinctly. So, yeah, it's a special, it is a special experience. The first time you get that is a one of a kind,
Right. And for me, it's always going after those moments. You go to the theater, you get the popcorn and the candy and your drink, and basically, not to be sacrilegious or anything, but like that is my communion.
Yeah,
so to speak. Like,
yeah, that's the that's the process.
This is my vice here. This is what I like to do, and again, those transportive experiences. You see something that you really feel like the magic, and I think it's a real thing. And you hear a lot of times when movie makers will talk about stuff like Marvel, how Scorsese will comment on Marvel, or Tarantino will talk about certain things.
Yeah.
And they kind of all these classic old school filmmakers and actors, they kind of all are on the same page.
Yeah, and to be fair, Scorsese was trash. He trashed the MCU when almost nobody was on his side.
Right.
And now 4 years later, everyone's like, you know what, he was totally right. And now they're all doing it. Now it's a super cool thing to do. It's like, yeah, there was like a 4 or 5 year transition period where it was like you were railed if you said something bad against MCU. Now the cool hot thing to do is to be like, oh yeah, MCU sucks. We've known it for years. Like someone didn't know it for years because these movies were breaking records.
Right.
We were all loving these movies. They may not be as good anymore, and maybe we're just tired of them. Again, you can ascribe whatever percentages to whatever excuse and change and whatnot. But they were hot. Now they're not, and now it's cool to crap on them.
Yeah, and you can even go back even just a tiny bit further, and you can. I think there was an interview with Spielberg who was like, look, streaming is like the death of the theater experience, and like they're all talking about that.
He compared straight to Netflix movies. He's like, they've had that my entire career. It's called straight to DVD or straight to video,
Right.
He's like this isn't anything new. It's like, ooh, it's like, because some pretty prestigious people have done these straight to streaming movies, and like for Spielberg to be like, it's either in theaters or it's crap. Like that kind of, like, he didn't say it, but like that's almost what he's implying.
Right, that's the
it's
intent
like,
behind
so you're just one step above a Sci-Fi Channel original, buddy. Like, oof, like that's got to be a blow to the ego to some of these folks. But
and not to bash those, I love those growing up. The terrible.
Yeah. Hey, there's
Dino Croc, Sharknado.
You need a good, well balanced film diet has a little bit of everything, so you can appreciate all the things about all of the things.
Yeah, that's important. Is when a movie knows what it is.
Yep.
How we talk about, sure, a movie, like I said, objectively can be, and technically this or that or whatever. But if a movie knows what it is, and a movie is really like just nailing what it wants to be.
Yep.
That it can be a great movie regardless of genre or budget or whatever.
A great video essay pointed out. He said, you always hear these people talk about a movie like John Wick where they're like, it knows what it is, and he's like, the term for that, the more sort of pretentious term for that, is tonal consistency.
Right.
When a movie is of a type and it is being consistent with that type, and it's not going, I always say, like, going off brand. Like, it's a John Wick movie. Like, if he broke out into a musical number 3/4 into that movie, it's like, what is going on here? Or if, like, a John Wick movie all of a sudden is no longer about John Wick for, like, half an hour, it's like, well, what are we making here, It's like, I always talk about, like, being on brand, being off brand. Just like a Barbie movie that is what it is. It's like, yeah, it's on brand for Barbie. It's like, if you were to make a sequel to Barbie and it was like a remake of Taken where Ken is Liam Neeson and he's rescuing Margot Robbie, like that might be a good movie in and of itself. I'm like, I don't think that'd be a terribly satisfying Barbie 2. You know? Right. It's like you gotta be on brand when you do this stuff. And that's important. And so when a movie sort of has tonal consistency and it's on brand and it knows what it is and it delivers that promise, I think that can make a movie that it's like, it can be a 10 out of 10 where it's like, well, it's not a perfect movie, but it's perfect at the movie that it is, and that might sound like you're making an excuse for anything. Well, anyone could say that about any movie. It's perfect at being the garbage tier trash that it is, like, sure, fine, whatever. It's like, it's all inherently subjective, but it's, movies, you can watch a movie and be like, I think it kind of nailed what it did.
What it was doing.
Or it didn't, and people can disagree on that, but, that can kind of create different levels of 10 out of 10s. Not everything is a 10 out of 10 in the same way.
Right. And that brings me to another thing is I have my favorite movies, and then I have movies that I would concede that are the best movies ever made.
Yeah.
And there is a clear distinction there. So on one hand, I can say Jurassic Park.
You can. That's one of those where you can stand on 2 feet and like argue it as your favorite movie, but you can also say like, no, this is like a great blockbuster. Here's all the reasons why.
Right.
Here's why it captured the audience. Like, this is an all timer for all these reasons outside of all the reasons I love it. You know?
Well, and just to spitfire a couple other ones, like, you know, some of my favorite movies personally, and we'll talk about these sometime. You know, Signs, M. Night Shyamalan's Signs, James Cameron's Aliens. You know, some of these movies are my favorite movies, but I'm well aware of the criticisms against those movies and how sure they could be fixed or changed, and that might make them better movies technically.
Yeah.
But they're still my favorite movies.
Yeah, and 10 out of 10 doesn't mean that I'm of the opinion that there are 0 flaws in this.
Exactly.
It's like 10 out of 10 is like, I'm of the opinion that this movie kind of gave me exactly what I wanted in the best way that I could reasonably expect it.
Yeah.
And like the experience was 10 out of 10. Not that like there isn't a single continuity error or flaw or anything. And again, on the other side of it, there are movies that I dislike, and then there are movies that I dislike, and I would also call them terrible movies. But there's also movies that like I'm not the biggest fan of, but I wouldn't call them bad movies. I wouldn't call Blade Runner 2049 a bad movie. Like, I don't think it's a bad movie. The aesthetics are like brilliant. I always say the aesthetics of that are like brilliant. The cinematography, the performances, the casting, the visual effects, like all that stuff is like great about that movie. Like, it's a very well made movie, and I'm a fan of Denny, I can't pronounce his last name's movies.
Denis Villeneuve.
Villeneuve, you know, whatever. And I'm not trying to trash on him. Like, I liked Dune Part 1 more and more every time I watch it. I'm a fan of his stuff. Sicario's awesome. But, like, I'm not a big fan of Blade Runner in general. I'm not really into it. And I love cyberpunk stuff, so it's really weird for me to not really like the cyberpunk movie, but
like the quintessential
Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 are just not really my jam. But I'm not here, it's like, oh, I hate those movies because I think they're bad. It's like, no, I just don't like them the way everyone likes them. But like, I can defend them, I can respect them, but it's like just not my cup of tea, you know?
And for the listeners out there, we agree on most of the movies that we see, which is why we have a podcast about them now, why we have conversations about them. But there are some that we just kind of don't really see eye to eye, and that is okay. We have a clear conversation about it. For you, you know, Aliens isn't one of your favorites. It's one of my top 5 of all time.
And I'm a huge Cameron fan, and I would put it, for me personally, Aliens is kind of more on the lower echelon of Cameron stuff, very much because it sort of feels like that's him going, as much as it is a Cameron movie with all of the sort of Cameron tropes and styles and hallmarks, it's like that's Alien 2 of an Alien franchise, where he didn't make the first movie, he didn't make the third movie. I kind of just only think of the trilogy. I don't really think of all the other films, really. But it's like, that's like him making chapter 2 of a 3-part, where each part was directed by it. Like, that's Cameron kind of going off-brand to do a little bit of something else. It's like, whereas the rest of the Cameron films, like Terminator, Terminator 2, The Abyss, True Lies, Titanic, the Avatar movies, like, they're very much of this sort of timeline of Cameron movies that feels kind of consistent with itself.
And I'll clarify for people, because and in no way is Chris saying that the lower echelon of Cameron movies is lower echelon of film at all. They're all amazing.
It's not like, oh, there's great Cameron movies and there's horrible Cameron
they're
movies.
All great.
It's like, I do consider them all very well made, and I'm a huge fan of all of them, except kind of like Aliens is like the least of my jam out of all of the Cameron movies that are my jam.
But there's a reason James Cameron is James Cameron. Let's just be clear on
100%,
that.
100%.
So,
I will defend I'm hardcore fan of the Avatar movies, and everyone else likes to crap on those movies. So it's like, whatever, dude.
Yeah, let's talk about Avatar. That's a good little segue.
Let's go.
Because for whatever reason, Avatar seems to be, at least online,
it's the cool thing to
which
hate
is
them.
a small look. My opinion of X and the Twitterverse and everything else is it is but a small fraction of what general audiences think.
Clearly,
let that be clear from the beginning.
Yeah.
The Film Jump believes that the Twitterverse does not represent the world.
Yeah, because if it did, I think both of the Avatar movies would be flops. You know, if it did, almost every movie might be a flop. Like, I don't know, and Blade Runner would have been the highest grossing movie of all time. You know, like it's clearly there's. I don't like to say film snobbish, but there's an echelon of film fan that is in the online communities that is very sort of strong in their opinions of like, these movies are good, these movies aren't. If you like these movies, you're a normie. If you like these movies, you're a real cinema fan. You know, there's a lot of that going on. And it's like, look, a lot of times they're more or less right. Like if someone wants to come out and be like, hey man, these Marvel movies ain't really that real of cinema, it's like, yeah, like I can kind of like, especially now, like, yeah, they're kind of like blockbuster schlock, like, okay, fine, but it's like you're gonna be like these people that will just be like, I have no understanding why Avatar made so much money. What is this money laundering scheme? It's like, dude, people love those movies, and I will gladly defend those movies. They're great sci-fi movies.
So here's a little like cinephile math that I came up with just in the last couple minutes of thinking about it.
Sure.
If you're one of those movie buffs that you have a letterbox, but then you make your list and then post them on Twitter, a second social media, I think is pretentious.
Yeah,
not really. I'm joking aside.
Yeah, I know what Letterboxd is, but like I've not dove enough in to be like, here's all my Letterboxd reviews. Like when IMDb was the thing, and they had the IMDb message boards. I was pretty big. Like I went down the whole top 250. I'm like, I'm gonna tell you how many stars these movies really deserve on IMDb. You know, I'm over here like The Dark Knight deserves 10 stars. I'm like The Godfather, not 10 stars.
9 stars.
Yeah, like 9 because I know how much, you know. I did that, but it's like Letterboxd, like I know it's a thing. I see this stuff, and I'm like, I don't know if I got the time to like recatalog every opinion I've ever had about any movie. I don't know.
And then you get the list on X where it's like, especially the Godzilla list, because we're on Godzilla Twitter all the time. And it's like you see, this one is S tier. This one is only A tier. Yeah. This one is B tier. Yeah. And I'm like, there is such a wide range.
Well, and doesn't every self-respecting fan know that like the top tier of Godzilla movies is G tier? Like that's how it's supposed to go. You're supposed to rename it G tier. Everyone knows that. You gotta get your stuff right, you know.
But in all seriousness, though, like you can have an opinion about a movie, and it's valid. Like whether or not somebody else calls you out for your opinion or not, that's your opinion, and that's okay.
It's okay to be wrong.
Right, exactly. You know, it's okay to be wrong about Avatar.
Yeah.
And here, for all the people out there who say that Avatar is just Pocahontas in space, my opinion of that is that had Cameron come out and said that for all the outspoken minority and said, this is my homage or this is my rendition, it would have been accepted.
Quentin Tarantino is famously quoted as saying that great artists don't pay homage, great artists steal. And he will like blatantly rip off scenes, camera angles, dialogue, from all of his favorite movies and be like, this is why I'm doing it. I'm totally doing this. But it's like, if you're in any way subtle or not transparent about it, you know, people, I remember when Avatar 2 came out, they're like, this is just Free Willy. This is just like some Free Willy vibes for the new generation. I'm like,
Gully.
And I'm like, you know what? Guess what? I'm like, I've got a 17-year-old brother or I've got a teenage brother. It's like, you know, he wasn't alive when Free Willy came out. He's never seen that. Like, not that he needs to have the Free Willy experience. I'm like, but this will be that for these new kids. That sort of like, hey, you know, like I said, I'm not some environmentalist or whatever, but it's like the story of this is like, you know, this is like
admirable.
Exactly, you know, like this is that sort of boy and his sea life animal friend story that you're getting, but this is like in a modern, awesome, epic sci-fi blockbuster versus some drama from the 90s with like Michael Jackson on the soundtrack. You know, it's like it's just that experience for the new generation. Like experiences are generational. It's like sometimes it's not like a full-blown remake of the movie. No one would on free movie. And here's the thing. If they were to remake Free Willy, you know what everyone would say? Just make an original movie that's like that and just in the style and in the spirit of it. It's like, well, you get a Free Willy subplot kind of in Avatar 2 and everyone's like, oh, this is just Free Willy. It's like, well, so you know, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I think from this conversation, you can pretty much guess how, you know, we think the whole people's opinions on X and Twitter are.
Everyone's wrong but us. That's clear.
Yeah, you know, that's
you're allowed to be wrong.
Yeah,
and we're cool with that.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's a necessary evil. Please follow us.
Yeah.
At the Film Jump. So, but again, I would say sometimes a movie can cross over into my favorite, and I also think it's like the best movie ever made. Yes. And one of those movies, just to give you an example of kind of my taste and my opinion, No Country for Old Men. Mm-hmm. I think it is an American classic. One of my favorite movies, and also one of the best movies ever made. I mean, my goodness, that was a jam-packed year for a good movie. Well, I don't want to say jam-packed.
2007 was great. It was again, maybe it was because we turned 15 and like had an awakening of like real movies, I don't know, but like for mainstream blockbusters, and then also the Oscar season, you know, you had 300 in March. In May, you had Spider-Man 3, Shrek 3, and Pirates of the Caribbean 3. In July, you had
trilogy cappers right there.
Yeah, in July, you had Transformers, And then in November, December, Oscar season, you had No Country for Old Men. You had There Will Be Blood. You had I Am Legend in December. And I'm sure I am missing something. Like, that is just off the top of my head. But just right off the top of my head, that's a whole shelf of your DVD section right there. Like, that's a good chunk of movies. Like, every 15-year-old that saw 300, like, that was one of the last big movies my dad took me to see before I was like a teenager, taking myself to movies or just going with my older brother. And like, my dad took me to see 300. It's like, that was like the coolest father-son movie you could ever imagine.
So
like,
I don't know. I'm sure my mother's going to listen to this all the way through, so she'll probably hear this story. But when 300 came out, we took a trip to Vegas, and going to Vegas at that age, there's nothing you can really do, except for maybe a magic show. And we were fortunate enough to do quite a few things. We did like a helicopter tour in the Grand Canyon, like all this kind of awesome stuff. But in the hotel we stayed in, they had their own bowling alley and they had their own movie theater. So I think for my parents to go out and do their thing at like the Bellagio or wherever they went, they're like, here, go watch a movie. And I think they paid for me to see something else. But of course I saw 300 instead. And that's, when I think I was first like, because I don't think I had seen Dawn of the Dead at that point.
I saw Dawn of the Dead in theaters.
I didn't get to see that in theaters, but that was my visceral introduction into Zack Snyder's style.
I'm very proud of the fact that like I've been a day one fan of Zack Snyder. Like I was always into horror movies growing up, and I begged my mom when Dawn of the Dead came out to take me to it opening weekend, and like I remember just like by the time you get to the end of the opening credits of that movie, I was like, this is just something else. I'm like, this is just like peak, like 11 going on 12-year-old me. And I'm like, this is cinema, like it was, like introduced me to that Johnny Cash song, The Man Comes Around. That's one of my all time favorite songs now. Like amazing soundtrack on that movie all around. Like, and then I saw 300. I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, Dawn of the Dead, now 300. I'm like, this guy only makes masterpieces. I'm like, this guy, I'm like, this is one of my favorite filmmakers at like 2 films in,
Yeah. Well, people like to talk about, at least nowadays, James Gunn and his needle drops with the music's, dropping in at a certain time.
Snyder was doing that
but
like
Snyder,
crazy.
I remember, was like...
In Dawn of the Dead and Watchmen. He did a lot of needle drops.
He did a very awkward needle drop for a lot of people with Hallelujah.
But kind of iconic in some ways.
Yeah.
It's like, has it aged poorly or aged well? It's like...
I'm in the camp that it's aged extremely well.
Yeah. I mean,
so for everybody out there, me personally... Host Jesse, I am an unapologetic Snyder fan because I love his style. I love his movies. Are they all perfect? No, not even close. Some of the bottom of the tier, we're going Army of the Dead. Not a huge fan.
I'd second that.
It's not a bad movie at all, and I'll watch it when it's on.
I'm not a huge fan of the Owls thing. The Owls thing is fine. Like, it's got great visuals, but like I'm just not a huge...
Legends of the Guardians.
Legends of the Guardians, yeah. Owls of Google. Like, I'm sorry, like, I don't like to be that guy that like doesn't like remember
I
the
saw
names
that
of
one in
movies.
theaters.
Yeah, I don't like to be the guy that like... That was one of those ones where like when that one came out, I was like, oh, Snyder's doing this freaking kids movie. I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, he sold out, man. But it's like... So it's like for a long time, that was the one I didn't see. But like, generally speaking, like, yeah, I'm a Snyder fan. I'm not one of these like he's the the savior of cinema or whatever. Like, the dude makes awesome movies, and I won't ever apologize for his awesome movies. I snuck into a showing of 300 as well. Before we got off that topic, my dad took me the first time, and then like a week later, I went with my buddy because we weren't 17, couldn't get into R-rated movies on our own. So we went to go see Ghost Rider with Nicolas Cage, the first one. It was still out. Yeah. And like, this shows you how not interested in Ghost Rider we were, because like we were kind of timing out, like, is there a showing of 300 that's like close to it that we could then walk into? Sorry, this is a whatever 15, 16-year-old crime, but we snuck into 300. So like, we didn't even finish Ghost Rider. Like, the third act was coming, like the big showdown, and we're like, dude, you just want to like go walk into that show of 300? Like, he's like, yeah, let's just do that. Like, so we never saw the third act of, and I'm not a walk out of the movies kind of a guy, but like, we just like and because I knew how good 300 was, I was like, dude, you gotta see. I'm like, screw this Ghost Rider noise. I'm like, the end of this movie is not going to be better than any part of 300. Right. So we snuck out and we saw 300, and so my second time seeing it, so that was incredible. But yeah, that was my one sneak into a movie experience. Yeah, and then the next one he came out with was Watchmen, and I had, I wasn't very old at the time, but I did see that one with my dad, and that was a little awkward, not to say the least. It was an older brother for me. There's some very R-rated stuff in that movie for sure, but yeah, again, a movie way ahead of his time. Yeah, like, that goes without saying. If that had come out 2 years after the Avengers, it's a completely different reception to that movie. Yeah, I agree. And is it perfect? No, it's not. But and a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's a terrible adaptation. Okay,
Well, look at 300. That's an amazing adaptation.
Yeah, and
you know,
here's
and
the
for
thing,
the most part,
I loved the Watchmen graphic novel. I read it because the movie was coming, and I loved the graphic novel. And I'll be the first one to say, like, he adds in a lot of overt violence and sexual stuff that is more implied in the graphic novel. I'm not saying the graphic novel
specifically Watchmen.
Yeah, specifically Watchmen is what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that the graphic novel would get by with like a PG-13, but there's actually like a decent amount more that's not explicitly on screen in the graphic,
like full frontal nudity,
or on page in the graphic novel versus the way he does, and like he just holds nothing back in the movies, you know. And so it's like, you know, stuff that's happening off screen is on screen. Like he's not cutting around certain things, you know, things like that. So it's like I kind of took a little bit of umbrage with that, because I'm like, well, if he had played a little bit more tame like the graphic novel, we still would have had an R-rated movie, but more true to the experience. And I was also one of those that I was like, he expands all these action scenes and fight scenes. I'm like, every time he did that, he could have put in like a few more minutes and pages of the stuff in the graphic novel. Like I was very hardcore on like 300 and Sin City spoiled me as far as like almost verbatim adapted from the graphic novel. Right. And so like every small departure for Watchmen, I was like, well, if he didn't do that, he could have put in another 2 pages of faithfulness to the graphic novel. But Watchmen is another one that's aged. That was one I didn't love right away, but that one's aged. Dawn of the Dead 300 loved right away. Watchmen, Sucker Punch didn't love them right away, but I've loved them since.
Well, and I know that at least like a lot of people saw the trailer for Watchmen in The Dark Knight, and
yes,
that is probably one of the best trailers of all time.
It was very funny because I was with my brother and my best friend, and like the trailer's coming up, and I immediately knew, and I was like, and like it was funny, like there's the title cards in the trailer, and I leaned over to my buddy.
The Smashing Pumpkin song.
Yeah, the Smashing Pumpkin song, and I was leaning over to my buddy. I was like, oh, this is from the director of 300, because he was the one I snuck into 300 with. And then it's like title card, like from the director of 300, and I was like, it's based on like one of the best graphic novels ever, and it's like based on the celebrated graphic novel or whatever. It's like, so it's this funny moment where I'm like leaning over and telling my buddy this stuff like as it's popping up on screen. So like I'll always remember that.
Yeah. It is currently 2023, and Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon is about to be released. You know, all the Dr. Manhattan stuff.
The hype is real. The hype is real. Yeah.
So that's just, we're Zack Snyder fans. Sorry, not sorry.
No, not sorry at all.
But some of my other favorite movies, you know, I have like, you know, it's hard to nail down like a top 10 list. I mean, that's for sure. It's too much.
You know, you've got something like, how do you not have the Lord of the Rings trilogy collectively on like any kind of top 10 list? You know, it's such an accomplishment. Like I love the movies dearly, and I'll even say that like, hey, like the movies are starting to maybe show their age slightly. You know, maybe it's if you're finding someone that wasn't there when they came out, they didn't grow up with it, to show them 3-hour movies. It's not as easy of an experience as you might think, even for cinephiles.
Yeah,
but it's like, you know, I still love them to death, and you can absolutely defend them. And it's like, how do you not put them up on any kind of like, certainly even if you're just going to say like, oh, of the new millennium, you know, even if you were going to say like, hey, leave the 20th century to the 20th century and talk about 21st century cinema, it's like, that's the trilogy of the 21st century, you know?
Well, you know, people can look at like letterbox ratings and all this stuff, but I kind of think that IMDb, the top 250, is somewhat.
It's certainly got a long tenure. That thing was launched in like the mid 90s,
and so for that,
or the late 90s.
For that, I'll give it some credit in that a lot of the movies on the top 250 on IMDb are there for a reason.
The Shawshank Redemption is a great movie. I'm not here to like scruples over like, oh, should The Godfather be number 1 or Shawshank or The Dark Knight? Because I'm pretty sure they, at some point in time, they've swapped 1, 2, and 3, and like fanboys will be like, downvote this movie and upvote this movie and all that thing. But it's like,
Nolan's got almost every one of his movies.
I'm pretty sure all of Nolan's movies are certainly in the top 250. I don't know about the top 50, but like they're pretty high up there. He's got a dedicated. I mean, I'm also a Nolan fan, you know, no secret there. I'm a huge, like, whereas I'm a massive Zack Snyder fan, like I own every Christopher Nolan movie. I don't own every Zack Snyder movie.
He's still very much a pioneer of that cinema experience, and for that we will always love him.
Yeah, talking about prioritizing theatrical, that guy knows how to do it, and he doesn't just do it with like, you know, he wrote his own ticket for the Oppenheimer contract, and it was things like $100 million budget, $100 million marketing campaign. It's like, those are normal asks. 100 days exclusivity in theaters when many directors were fighting for like 60 days exclusivity.
Top Gun Maverick got what, 90?
Yeah,
90?
and he, I think they ended up expanding Top Gun when it did so well, but he asked for 100, and the stipulation that that whoever got the deal ended up being Universal didn't put another movie out 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after his movie because he didn't want them focusing on something else that was maybe deemed more commercial. So it's like, you're not only going to release my movie, give it 100 days, but like my movie's going to be the only movie you're dropping that month because you're going to sell my movie the way you ought to sell my movie. I'm going to be the priority release. And look, it made nearly it made nearly $1 billion. It's a 3-hour R-rated historical drama with no action sequences, and it made nearly $1 billion. It's like, yeah, cinema wins. You know?
and not that we put a whole lot of stock into the Academy Awards anymore, and that'll be a topic for another time for sure. But
if Oppenheimer doesn't sweep, they will only have further devalued their credibility.
Well, no, I think this is a time when, you know, looking back at like Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, how that took 11. I think this is a time when it's probably not going to get 11.
No,
but I think it'll be a sweep for most of the categories.
And here's the thing, you know deep down they want whatever's going to give them ratings. Not that they vote according to ratings, but you know, storylines make up this stuff, and you kind of, you know, you want people to sort of, the things that get people watching the Oscars are investment in what's going to win what the awards. If Oppenheimer has the potential to have like a record amount of nominations or something like that, it's going to get people talking. Like the momentum is there. It's like, look, maybe it's not going to win everything. Maybe it won't win anything. It's the voters, people to decide.
Well, these are voted by people in the industry. So
exactly,
how can they not vote for something that will champion their own industry?
Yeah. How do you not put respect on the man's name and the film that it is? Because it's like, it absolutely deserves it. It's like the only question of it not getting it is like this weird political thing of like, well, is it the kind of movie that should win? It's like, well, how about you just say, like, is it a great movie? And on that basis, is it deserving of being called Best Picture?
Yeah, let's look back at 2009, Chris, when, you know, the highest grossing movie of all time, you know, he loses to his ex-wife.
Change the industry. Yeah, Avatar changed the industry, and then they give it to, you know, I think there was a number...
The Hurt Locker.
The Hurt Locker. But there was a number of years there where it was like a running gag where the film that won Best Picture was always the one that sold the fewest tickets in theaters.
Yeah, it's true.
I think there's several years that have it. It was always like the most obscure option. It's like, that feels like it can't be coincidence. Like, it's not like it always has to be the most successful one, but the fact that it's like always the least successful one, it's like, that's the voters saying, people don't know what the good best movie is. We need to tell them what the best movie is. James Cameron said as much. He's like, that's them telling people what the best movie of the year is because they don't trust people to figure it out. It's like, that's malarkey.
Right. And I will, you know, on the flip side say, like, sure, everybody's going to see Barbie, and that's making buku dollars.
Yeah,
but
I'm not saying Barbie's best picture.
You know, yeah, exactly. So, you know, it kind of works a little bit on the both ways there. Sometimes a fantastic movie is making a lot of money, but I think there are explanations. Number one, you look at a movie like Captain Marvel, the first one, hits $1 billion box office.
Yeah.
Why? Probably because it was riding high on the Endgame hype.
Endgame hype. I'm not saying... Here's the thing. If the Marvels had come out and retained like 70, 80, 90% of the audience of Captain Marvel, if it made almost $1 billion, or it made a cool 6, 7, 800 million, and it, you know, most of the people who saw that movie also saw the Marvels, you could say like, okay, Captain Marvel was just a big hit. All those fans came back for the second one. But it's like, the bigger the gap is, which it's dramatic, you have Captain Marvel that made over $1.1 billion, and the Marvels is struggling to make $200 million currently. That is maybe the widest gap that any movie that has ever made $1 billion and its sequel has ever had. It's like, that tells you that there was that the first one was the anomaly. That like the success it had, what was the other stuff going on? Because its sequel released on its own didn't even muster up anything. Right. So it's like, well, it came out about a month and a half before Endgame came out, and they told you it was required viewing for Endgame, when truthfully it wasn't really. You know, you could easily edit that character out of Endgame, give those scenes, those key scenes, to other characters. You know, Rocket can find Iron Man in space, Hulk or Thor, or someone could rage out and blow up Thanos' ship. You know, there's a number of those scenes that could just be handed off to other characters, and that movie wouldn't lose anything. She had no story with Thanos. She had no other ties and commitments into this narrative. She had no place story-wise in that movie. It's like she was just there because they wanted her there because they knew Endgame would be big, and she's one of the next generation Avengers. Right. Then they put her movie out, tell you it's required viewing. It's a bad 90s prequel. The 90s nostalgia is fun, but like, it's a very by-the-numbers, mid-tier kind of a Marvel superhero movie, and then it makes $1 billion just because Marvel hype and Endgame's coming, you know? Yeah,
so that kind of brings me up to the DC side of things, which I keep saying this is our ground zero, our episode 0. It's our kind of generalizing, get to know us episode. I do want to save DC stuff for later, especially with Aquaman coming out. But another movie, same thing, it hit $1 billion.
That'll be very interesting to see.
And all eyes are on Aquaman now,
and
because of the current state of DC and everything.
And it was the same sort of, because Aquaman was December of 18, Captain Marvel was March of 19, when the superhero stuff was as high on hype as
it could be,
as it had ever been. Infinity War had just come out in May. Everyone was on it. So and I've always kind of said that, in my opinion, like Aquaman and Captain Marvel are two of like the weaker examples of movies that have made $1 billion. Not that the best movies have to be the best to make $1 billion anymore, because it's only more and more common every year. But there was a period of time where they were like, most movies that had made $1 billion or more were like pretty darn good movies by any wager of it. Most of them.
And then you can take into account maybe ticket inflation,
3D,
and whatever,
and all that stuff. Yeah, sure. Like maybe Alice in Wonderland isn't that great as a movie, and it's $1 billion. But like generally, but then like Aquaman and Captain Marvel, it's one of those movies where you kind of go like, how did either of these make $1 billion? Like not that they're necessarily the worst things in the world. I think they're both kind of like mid. I think they're, and I hate, that's a cheap term, but like they're kind
serviceable.
They're both kind of
good.
run of the mill. There's things to enjoy about them, and they do their stuff kind of fun, and there's not like awful or whatever. This isn't like offensively bad, but it's like, how is it $1 billion good? And I said that after seeing either of those movies.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see how much the Marvels dropped from Captain Marvel and how much Aquaman drops from the first Aquaman, because it's like those are $2 billion movies. Like, are the sequels going to both be in the absolute gutter? We'll see how much they retain.
Well, let's say Aquaman doesn't make anywhere near it. I think there's a lot of factors that you could say, well, the current state of the DC cinematic universe is negatively affecting that.
Yeah, the fact that the franchise is ending certainly puts a damper on things. I mean, I'm one of those, like, I will fully admit, I was all hyped up when they announced Cavill was back at the end of Black Adam, and then they, quote unquote, never hired / not hired Henry
That is
Cavill.
Political nonsense.
Yeah.
Do not drink this.
It's like, say what you want. Like, okay, you don't want me to say he was fired, whatever. All I know is they announced he was back, and then they not hired him. Okay, so you not hired him, and I said it then. I was like doing this. I was being like a salty nerd then. I was like, okay, I said, I'm not going to pay. I was on the point when you were bringing him back. I was ready to give Shazam a chance. I was ready to give The Flash a chance. I was ready to give Blue Beetle a chance. I was going to buy 4 tickets. I had the Black Adam 4K disc and the Shazam 1 4K disc in my cart on Amazon. Like, no joke. I was ready to like get back on board for like whatever DC's bringing. And then they not hired Cavill. He was not hired from the position. And I'm like, okay, I'm not buying Black Adam on disc. I'm not buying the first Shazam on disc. I'm not buying a ticket to Shazam 2. I'm not buying a ticket to Flash. I'm not buying a ticket to Blue Beetle. And I'm not buying a ticket to Aquaman. I'm like,
you gotta vote with your wallet.
I'm one guy. I'm like, but you have to vote with your wallet. And it looks like a lot of other people, for whatever reason, did as well.
Yeah, and that's not to call it people who didn't go Snyder cultists or anything.
Nope.
But, it's just, that's just how it is.
The social media buzz and electricity when Cavill was announced back was in the millions of impressions and reposts and likes and this and that. And then it's like, Cavill's one of those things where it's like, where dudes love him, nerds love him. He's like a hardcore gamer. He's a hardcore nerd. He defends like the nerds and their opinions. And like I've never met a lady that doesn't swoon over Henry Cavill. Yeah. Heck, half the men I know will swoon over Henry Cavill. Like,
he's a man.
Yeah, and I'd hang out with that guy. I'd play, I'd let him teach me how to play Warhammer or whatever. I'm like, yeah, dude. Like,
Henry, if you're listening,
yeah, seriously. Like, he seemed like he had the box of like, he's kind of a guy's guy, but also a ladies' man, and he's playing Superman. And it's like, no, we don't want that. We want to reboot.
And Chris, you cannot tell me that Dwayne Johnson and Henry Cavill and a couple other people just muscled his little cameo in. No. That had to have been approved.
Yeah, you can't just make it happen.
No, you can't.
They pitched it, and they made it, and they did it.
And made it work. It was approved. And then for Gunn and crew to come in and do a 180.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And I'll say this. Black Adam made more money at the box office than any DC movie released in 2023. And Aquaman will be the final decider of that. But you talk about, oh, that movie didn't make enough. Well, look what you're making now once you announced Cavill was leaving. After Black Adam, I said that wasn't necessarily the greatest DC movie ever. I said, but it had momentum. You had people hyped. Zack Snyder's Justice League redeemed that Justice League movie in a huge way. Zack Snyder's Justice League is exceptional. And then Black Adam was like officially bringing Cavill back as Superman. You had people that were jazzed up about stuff.
Yeah.
And then what did they? And then it's like, you make a poster where it's Dwayne Johnson's face and the lightning bolt on one side and Cavill's face and the S on the other side. That's a $500, $600, $700, $800 million sequel they had cooking.
Yeah, you're gonna make a profit.
Yeah,
on it.
that's a huge hit. It's like it doesn't matter if Black Adam itself was necessarily the biggest hit. It's like it was a foundation block that you could have easily built huge things off of. Given us a Man of Steel 2, given us Zack Snyder's Justice League 2 and 3. That stuff would have been electric, and it would have built momentum, and it would have built enthusiasm.
And we're not here to just bash on James Gunn, but
I hope Superman Legacy is the best movie ever. I'm a huge Superman fan. No one's rooting for that movie to be great other than me. I want it to be great regardless because I like Superman a lot. I'm one of those guys that Superman is my favorite superhero, but it's like I got to see some stuff to really make me inspired.
Yeah, prior to all this, I'm actually a very, very big James Gunn fan.
Yes.
I don't like how he's handled his marketing for the DC stuff. He engages a lot with people on Twitter to say no, that's not happening.
Yeah,
yes,
and that's his
whatever.
That's his prerogative. But it's like
But for me, and again, we don't always agree on everything. I'm a big fan of the Suicide Squad, James Gunn's.
Yeah.
And then going back before that, I really, really like many other people, like his Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy.
Yeah,
Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, is one of my favorite superhero movies of all time.
I'm a diehard, like one of those weird, obscure 10 people that have seen Super. I love Super. I love that movie, and
Slither.
I think in Slither I don't like as much as Super, and I also love the first Guardians. I think is amazing. I don't think 2 and 3 are as good. I think 3 is better than 2. But 2 has an amazing ending. 2 is one of those where it's like it's a 7 out of 10 movie with like a 10 out of 10 emotional ending. So it's like it's elevated and everyone comes out
I
of the
think
movie.
it definitely goes 1 is the best, 3 is the second one,
I agree
2
with that.
is the third.
I agree with that. And I do love the first one. Like the first one felt like a revelation the first time you saw it. And so it's like he's a totally like talented and capable guy. He makes his own flavor of movies, and it's like that can be like talent is talent. And like look, the casting for Superman Legacy, I'm liking, I don't have a lot of objections with the casting choices he's making. Like these are some solid casting choices. It's like as long as your script is right and your direction's on point and you just kind of make something that's like the epic, iconic kind of Superman movie, it can be amazing. But it's like I'll always wish for what we didn't get. I'll always wish that we could have at least gotten Justice League 2 and 3. But,
well, and apparently, Snyder just did an interview recently where he came out and said that he hopes the best for James Gunn, because Snyder is a great guy. Whatever you say about his movies, he's a dude. He is a great guy.
Yep.
Everybody says that about him on the film sets, but he said that really he would love to go back to do The Dark Knight Returns. Mm-hmm. And if you look at his past, he could definitely deliver a great adaptation.
Yeah, and he talked about that would be an adaptation in the style of like a 300 Sin City where it's almost word for word, panel for panel.
Yeah.
Like, and that's where he shines. Like everyone's like, oh yeah, his best movies are when he's just copying someone else's work. But it's like, dude, he's a visual stylist.
Yeah.
And that's a thing that people sometimes halfway use as an insult or a backhanded compliment or whatever. But it's like the dude is a visual stylist, and I mean that in the best way possible. You look at his movies and the aesthetics are off the chart, and he would absolutely home run The Dark Knight Returns. But if the pieces could fall in a way where we get Justice League 2 and 3, I would pay good money for that to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, his new movie, Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, is coming out on Netflix soon. Super stoked about that.
Looks quite cool.
It looks like a lot, to be honest with you. Like, I watched the trailer, I'm like, that's a lot.
There's a lot going on.
He's throwing in a lot.
It's a big 2-part kind of movie. There's each of the 2 halves is going to have like an R-rated cut that's an hour longer.
Which will probably end up being superior.
Yeah, they've talked about like RPG games and graphic novel tie-ins, and
Netflix is all in,
and video games, and like maybe like animated series, like all like the whole world of it. And it's like, okay, like sure, but it's like, let's get one movie first, and just like let's get a little bit of a taste of this before you start trying to sell us on like the whole expansive universe.
Here's my prediction for reviews across the board, not necessarily from us, so to speak, but I think it's going to be typical of most of his movies. The fans, especially hardcore Snyder fans, they're all going to love it.
Yeah.
Critics are going to be middle of the road, like always, because here's the thing. He does action. He does slow-mo. He does all these things.
There's something about him, the industry, the kind of like the sort of Hollywood industrial complex of the critics and the media or whatever. There's something about him that they just don't really seem to dig.
Yeah, they don't,
in the way that it seems like they slather praise on some people, and everyone normie is like, I don't really get why they're always like praising these people for this work they're doing. In the other way, it seems like they've all missed the boat on like the fact that like he makes some awesome stuff and a lot of people love his stuff, and they're just like, no, Snyder's not good. Snyder's not good. Like, yeah, he is. You know, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of more or less the general kind of feel of where you and I are coming from as far as our opinions, how we kind of rate movies and review them. So when we talk about movies from here on out, if we say, "Oh, dude, that movie was a 10 out of 10,"
Yeah.
we will elaborate for sure, but know that that's the experience.
And even when I rank movies, I'm like objective, subjective ranking. Like, what does that stuff even mean in the world of talking about your favorite movies? It's like, it's like, you know, it's like saying like red's my favorite color, and that's an objective ranking. It's like, what the hell does that even mean?
Right,
you know,
exactly.
it's like, you know, there's more to it than picking your favorite color, but sometimes it's as simple as that. You know, it's just personal preference and the kind of movies you're into, the kind of movies you're not into. What checks your boxes. I always like to say, you know, I always like to be like, dude, that checked all the boxes for me. I watch a movie like Godzilla versus Kong. I worked at a theater. I could see movies for free, so I abused it for Godzilla versus Kong. And I wanted it to be the movie I saw the most in theaters. I saw Godzilla versus Kong 10 times in theaters. That movie...
That is a lot.
That's a post-COVID movie. It was the first big movie back. I took my younger brother. It sort of hit at exactly a point where I needed it. It was the kind of like escapist, euphoric, entertaining movie that I needed. Waited my whole life to watch Godzilla defeat Kong. And so it checked all the boxes for me. And I was like, I just want this movie to be the one that I can say I saw it in theaters more than any other movie. Love that movie to death.
And because of your story and your life and everything that's happened as far as movies go, you know, we're not talking about your life,
Yeah.
has led to you feeling that way.
Exactly.
And that is a legitimate thing.
Exactly.
You know, you loving Godzilla versus Kong doesn't mean like, oh, well, Chris just likes,
Yeah,
you know,
it's not like,
movies,
oh, that's
you know?
the greatest movie of all time. Like, I would never tell anyone that Godzilla vs. Kong is the greatest movie of all time. My favorite theater experience I've ever had, yes, because I could go into extreme detail of that day and that theater experience, because that's a podcast in and of itself, but it is my favorite trip to the movies I've ever had.
Well, I think one of the my top favorite experiences in the movie just happened when we saw -1 for the first time.
That was something special.
So I think right now, if you're not wanting to hear our kind of quick spoiler review of Godzilla -1, now is a good time to check out.
Click off.
Yeah, we appreciate y'all coming in and listening to everything, and we're going to keep bringing you episodes as much as we can. Hopefully we can like record them kind of over the weekend. We hope to drop them like every Monday. If not, it'll be somewhere around Monday. But y'all can follow us at the Film Jump on X, and we're on Spotify and everywhere else. You know, you can listen to podcasts. But so yeah, if you're going to check out, thanks for listening. But now we're going to get into our quick spoiler review of Godzilla -1. We did do a spoiler-free review, kind of impressions overall, and the episode -1. If you want to check that out, go ahead. But Chris, I gotta say, especially after watching this movie a second time now, and a little bit of context, we saw it first in IMAX, and then this time we accidentally saw it in Screen X.
Yeah, I thought it was.
And I have like a quick review of Screen X.
Go for it.
I gotta say, maybe it's different for a huge Hollywood mega budget like Avengers Endgame $200+ million movie.
You want to explain to the audience what Screen X means?
Yeah. I'm sorry. So Screen X, and the reason why we didn't know it because it didn't say when I got the tickets on Fandango.
Well, and because every theater chain has their own branding of their own like large format anyway. They'll GTX, giant screen, STX. So when I see something like Screen X, I'm like, oh, that's just their big screen. That's their thing that's not IMAX, but it's like it for them.
Well, and to be fair, I didn't even see the Screen X when I booked the tickets, so I just said giant screen. So anyways, Screen X is where you have your regular screen in the middle like you normally do, but then you have projectors that shine on the side walls, your peripherals, that kind of help expand the image. You can think of it almost like ultra wide viewing experience.
Yeah, it's sort of there. It's not necessarily like it's at least for this. I don't know if it's for other movies, but the resolution and the detail was not there to sort of be like, oh, you're meant to look at all three of these screens.
Right, it's not like a 360 experience.
Yeah, it's more to give you extra visual information to fill your peripherals while you're watching the front screen, just to give that sort of wraparound experience. And it wasn't for every single sequence. Again, maybe for some films it is. I know that'd be insanely expensive, but it was for a lot of sequences, a lot of outdoor stuff, and there's good and bad things about it. I'll let you elaborate.
Yeah, so my biggest gripe, at least, and now this is a Toho production, right? This movie has reportedly about a $15 million budget, and we'll talk about that in a second. The my problem with it is that the light shining from the side screens was bleeding onto the main screen. So where your main screen touched the wall right there, because it was Screen X, it goes wall to wall.
Yeah.
It actually kind of washed out the image because of the light bleed, and it kind of dulled out and washed out the side. So you're this is kind of your technical mumbo jumbo, but your black levels weren't so great, and it kind of washed the image out. And I was like, man, I don't know if I'm really a fan of that. I like a more perfect picture.
Throwing a bunch of extra light into the same size room onto the adjacent walls is definitely gonna
bounce light
definitely messes with that a little bit, especially when we had just seen it in a great IMAX a few days prior, which was like a perfect experience. And so this definitely. I will say though, it for the deficits that it did create, like it was a cool thing to kind of have the wider view of a lot of shots, the peripheral imagery. It's like, and if you're in the right row from the screen, like it is that sort of all-encompassing experience. Part of the thing that got me going from a sort of back of the theater kind of movie theater viewer to kind of sitting more towards the middle or even at a little bit closer is because I got stuck sitting 3 rows from the front for the midnight showing of the Avengers because it was so packed, and I thought I was going to hate it, but I ended up kind of loving it because it was just kind of this overwhelming visceral experience. And so I started to always sit pretty close to it for a lot of movies, and so that wraparound experience kind of gives you that without you having to sit quite as close to the screen.
It definitely adds to the immersion. But a couple other quick gripes is that, at least with this one, because they're dealing with a very small budget comparatively, is the CGI, the VFX were blurry, and maybe some of that is so you don't focus on it. And then a lot of the shots where they're out in the wide, like the ocean, the ocean was not lined up, and you could tell and sometimes the waves are different. They're filming this at a different time,
and sometimes the cut would be just like a split second before or after for the peripheral stuff. And again, I don't know if that's speaking to the level of production this was, or if that's just more of an inherent.
If we're missing something, let us know in the comments.
Like if we were to see something like the Avenger, some hit new like Avatar or something in that format, would it be much more high resolution and focused and all that stuff, or is it just meant to be kind of like an aesthetic fill? Because that's not really, because the movie is that front screen. That's what's on your Blu-ray. That's what's on your 4K disc. That's what's in every other theater. Like that's the priority. So it's like, this is ancillary stuff for a pretty niche way of watching the movie. So it's like, I could understand if that's not ever going to be anything more than it's just kind of meant to fill your peripherals and be like an aesthetic thing. Like the people that have the big screen TVs that like the glow around the TV matches the movie. Like, maybe it's just meant to be a glorified version of that to kind of just fill you in the world. Like you're not meant to be looking at these side screens and seeing all this extra information, So, but it's tough because this is the first film I've ever seen that way. So it's like, I don't know if Toho's playing by the rules that everyone plays by, or if they're like, hey, we can do this.
There's different tiers, man.
Yeah, we can do this 40x screen, but like ours isn't going to be as in depth or amazing as maybe a big $200 million blockbuster,
Yeah, and again, that's the quality of the image and the frequency that it showed up. That none of that was a detriment, I think, to the viewing experience. My only problem was that light bleed, the bounce light rather, on the side of the screen, the main screen that you're focusing on, kind of washed out the image on the far right and far left.
Yeah,
so,
and I'll say it didn't go unnoticed, but I think with stuff like that, I'm in the theater, I'm less bothered by it than someone like you.
So let's bring it back to the movie itself.
Yep.
While I'm not really going to spend a whole lot of time to get into like the character names and everything, but the movie follows a kamikaze pilot in Japan who, for his own reasons, I guess kind of was scared, and he kind of gave up. He lands on an island. I believe it was Odo.
Yeah, right. Right off the jump, that's an interesting concept for a character. A quote like failed kamikaze pilot. Like your duty was to carry a plane with a bomb and suicide bomb yourself or self delete yourself, dive bomb. I know the words and the censorship stuff, but like, dive bomb yourself into a target and take it out and sacrifice yourself to do it. And it was sort of like promoted. Again, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in Japanese culture or what's propaganda, what's this or that, but it was meant to be seen as like an honorable thing to do.
Well, that was the culture.
You're laying down, or at least certainly they were trying to push it as a cultural thing. Maybe not, but like you laying down your life to help us win is for the betterment of all of us, kind of a thing.
So our main character, he doesn't want to do this. He lands on an island, and
under the pretense that his plane is experiencing technical problems.
Right, because on the island of Odo, there are the technicians there who try to fix it, and they tell him, "Look, there's nothing wrong with your plane."
Yeah,
But before they get too much into it, though, our titular character Godzilla shows up, which was a crazy surprise for me, having been spoiler free the whole time. And he shows up in a very dinosaur like.
We get a proto Godzilla, sort of precursor Godzilla show up, and that form showing up and that early in the movie were both surprises. Within minutes, yeah. Both big surprises. And the clear, I'll be, I guess, the lore and history guy here, but like the clear homage there is the 1991 Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah involves flashbacks and time travel back to World War II to reveal that Godzilla was a surviving prehistoric dinosaur-like creature that was on an island, and the island was impacted by the nuclear tests on the Bikini Atoll, and that mutated him into proper Godzilla. Like, this is pulling that origin story just without all of the time travel mumbo jumbo, which is actually cool because that's a nice one. That's like he was a prehistoric creature that got mutated to become Godzilla, a victim of the atomic bomb just as much as anyone else, which is interesting.
Well, and this movie does not give you any indication of where he came from. It doesn't explain
what his Odo Island legends. Yeah, and that's about it.
That's it, and it doesn't need it. It didn't need it.
No.
So he is one of two survivors, and the other being the technician who called them out saying, "Hey, we didn't find anything wrong with your airplane. You're responsible for these men's death because you didn't shoot at Godzilla we asked you to."
Yep, during the attack they tell him to jump into his plane and man his gun and shoot at Godzilla to save the rest of them, and he goes over but he freezes up. He doesn't do it. So then everybody else gets chomped, so it ends up with just being our main character and the tech guy. Only two survivors of the encounter. The tech guy, Tachibana was his name, blames our main character, and has like twice the much reasonings to hate this guy. He's first was going to call him out for being a sort of abandoning your post-suicide or kamikaze pilot, and then he fails them when Godzilla attacks, and all of his his entire team, his entire pit crew gets taken out.
Yeah, and I gotta say, seeing Godzilla show up in the way he did, and first of all, the CG was great, especially for the budget.
He was fast, he was feral, he was animalistic.
Yeah, and animalistic in the way where he was literally biting these soldiers, and I know that Toho kind of has like this deal where they don't show him eating people.
Yeah,
like that's not
they
a
have
thing.
a thing of like Godzilla doesn't eat people, I guess.
Right, but to see him actually bite them and then throw them was a visceral, as a Godzilla fan.
Yeah, and to see Godzilla of a scale where it kind of works, where he's not just like engulfing them in his mouth. It's like, no, he's chomping them like in the upper half and flinging them, sort of not a T-Rex sized Godzilla, but a sort of more dinosaur, like super dinosaur sized Godzilla. Like, it just made everything much more personal and more small scale, and again, vicious, awesome looking, great unique sequence for a Godzilla movie. Hard to pull off a unique sequence in a Godzilla movie, but that was one of them.
And right out the gate, it was something for sure. So then we fast forward a little bit to he comes home. His home is devastated by
the fire bombings
in Tokyo that were dropped. His parents have passed away, and everybody's dealing with that. Our main character meets another, like a local girl, or a woman rather, who is taking care of a baby who is not hers.
Yeah, so
she was tasked with taking care of this infant.
Yeah, so her parents were killed in the firebombs just like him. While she was fleeing, a woman who was dying had a baby and gave it to her and said, "Please just take care of my baby." So you have this essentially a young kind of homeless man, a young homeless woman, and she's taking care of this baby. So what's left of his home, his sort of damaged home that he's staying in, he takes them in.
Yeah, and throughout this little time in the movie, it's a very, very somber tone,
dour,
and you really feel what these people are going through, I think, and very effective. The music was. It was subtle, but it was effective.
Yeah.
Everything was great. So we kind of fast forward a little bit in time. There's a couple of time jumps here where she kind of stays, even though he may not want her to.
Yeah,
he doesn't want a part of this.
It's not like this kind gesture. She kind of just invites herself into his house, falls asleep there with the little girl, and he just does not kick them. Doesn't have the heart to kick them out or be cruel to them. But it's sort of like, it's not like he didn't offer for them. They kind of just stayed and he didn't kick them out. So it kind of just happened, and And then so he gets a job to provide for them, and his job is working on essentially a tugboat that's made of wood that's going around, and it's disarming and decommissioning all of the landmines that the Japanese and U.S. governments put all in the oceans around Japan during the war. So they have to go clip the mines from the chains, fire on the mines, detonate the mines, and move along. So that's the work he gets to provide for his family. And you see they build like a new little house adjacent.
Yeah,
to the
there's a
wrecked
nice
one.
little sweet montage where things are all hunky dory.
Yeah. Which I've seen in a few Japanese movies. Like they seem to like their like pleasant music montages things.
Yeah.
So like it's a nice passage of time moment, you know.
And then fast forward a little bit, because we're not going to recap like every detail of the movie here, but Godzilla comes back, you know, and there is a fantastic. Look, I love the ending of this movie too. I actually like all of it, but it might be my favorite section of the movie. I'll do some more watches of it.
Yeah.
But there is an amazing sequence where Godzilla attacks a larger boat that has cannons and just demolishes it.
Yeah.
And then it goes after our main character and his friends on the boat that disarmed the bombs. And the CGI, the VFX all around.
It's a very Jaws-esque sequence, you know, very much like sort of trying to take out the shark in Jaws.
And the music that they're playing in the background was like constantly like rising.
Yeah.
Not like in the same way that the Joker score does in The Dark Knight.
But it did.
But
have
it kind of
See, it kind of made me think of Dunkirk a little
Yes.
bit. That's like the score had some Dunkirk vibes on the ocean.
Yes, it did. Yeah,
you know,
and it had like almost like a ticking clock, like
yeah, like just that slowly ramping up. I'm sure they studied that a little bit, you know, and so they're trying to fight, because they're just a little tugboat and they have mines that they've collected, and so they're trying to drop their mines as Godzilla is chasing behind them, get the mines wedged into his dorsal plates, or at one point they get one wedged into his mouth, and then fire on the mine to blow it up. And they manage to do that. They fire on a mine that he's caught in his mouth, and you see the aftermath is that it's blown half of Godzilla's face off. You're like, what? Like Godzilla's dead? As soon as the thought of like, so what? Godzilla's dead enters your mind, you see that he is immediately regenerating his head and face back, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is Godzilla with regenerative abilities faster than any other Godzilla's ever been displayed as having them. Yeah. And he comes back with this epic scar on his face from where he healed.
And then quickly right after that, that's when he destroys the larger boat, and just an amazing sequence all around. And I gotta say, this is probably the most terrifying Godzilla has been in a long time.
Definitely
like,
menacing.
Yeah, it just absolute terror.
And you feel, not that it's a terribly emotive creature, but like you feel the rage in everything he's doing. Like he's pissed about something.
Right. But that's the thing, like they don't go into it.
They don't personify him.
And
they don't have characters like they never refer to Godzilla like what's on his mind, what's he thinking, what's he all about. Like no, it's just like he's vicious and they're trying to stop him. Exactly.
Yeah. So what I really like about this movie, and there's always a message. There's always a theme of like every Godzilla movie. Sometimes it's apparent, sometimes it's a little less, not as heavy fisted.
Sometimes it's more general and universal. Sometimes it's a bit more specific.
This one, we kind of talked about it in our spoiler-free review. It's not so much anti-government or anti.
Yeah, it's not pro-government. That's for sure.
It's pro-citizen.
Yeah,
it's
pro-human, pro-people.
Human.
Saying pro-human is a little generic. Like, oh, it's a humanist movie. I don't like to say things like that, but it's like very much so. And like, I don't like to say things like, oh, this is, if you're a depressed guy, this is the Godzilla movie for you. But maybe, like,
right.
If you're a dude who's maybe not having a good time right now, I'm not saying this is therapy, but if you're maybe not having the best time in life, and this is an escapist movie you watch, like this movie might put you in a better mood, might lift your spirits a little bit.
Right. So, our people, they get together, they devise up a plan, as they do in most of these, and it seems kind of weird at first, but then it ends up coming through, and our main character goes through his arc is that he wants to live, but he goes through and he has, you mentioned before, like this survivor's guilt, and he feels bad for being the one that was the coward, but he lives. But then he goes through this really awesome change where he actually still ends up wanting to live.
Yeah,
he has something to live for because of this family he's kind of developed throughout this movie.
Yeah, they play with structure and circular storytelling and character arcs very much. Because at the beginning, I think, oh, a guy who's supposed to be a kamikaze pilot who wimped out on it. It's like, well, the typical setup would be, well, he's gonna fulfill that in a more honorable way by the end of it. Like he wimps out on being the kamikaze guy at the beginning. He's gonna end being the heroic kamikaze pilot. Like that's an easy arc to see. But then it's like, he's got the survivor's guilt and all of this stuff that's weighing on him from being a failed kamikaze pilot. But it's like he didn't want to die then. Throughout the movie, he only gains more reasons to not want to die.
And specifically to kind of interject here is the girl who ends up being the mother character to the little girl who is kind of like, what, 3 now by the time it's
toddler,
when it's 1947.
Yeah.
There's a really great sequence where Godzilla wreaks havoc in Ginza.
Yeah, Ginza.
And we think that she perishes. Godzilla uses his atomic breath and just
the shockwave looks like it completely takes her out.
Yeah, she saves our main character in the act. And so we think she's gone. Yeah. And so now our main character is like, well, I have to live for this girl. His friends encourage him, well, why didn't you marry this girl? You are the father kind of thing. And they kind of like really shake him into it.
So only to give him more survivor's guilt. You know?
Exactly.
And it's this great thing where it's like going into the third act of the movie, it's like this is a character who's like completely torn of like he was meant to be a kamikaze pilot, he didn't want to be. He's got stuff to live for, but he's also got like the survivor's guilt is only piled on him more and more, because you also have to think in the back of the head, like if he had shot Dinosaur Godzilla, maybe he would have killed Dinosaur Godzilla, and maybe there would be no Godzilla now to do all the stuff he's doing now. Like it's like all this stuff's weighing on him. So by the time you get to the third act, which we'll elaborate on, you don't know if this character is wanting to die or wanting to live, and that's a great thing when the character's potentially faced with a kamikaze mission of sorts in the final act. Like, it's hard to create genuine, like I remember the end of Top Gun Maverick, I was like, I don't know if they're gonna kill Tom Cruise's character or not. Like, like to put yourself in that position, because that's these superhero movies, that 99.99% of times none of the superheroes or main characters are going to die at all. Zero risk.
Typically, yeah.
Just narrative. They've got toys to sell. They've got sequels to make. But a movie like this, to be able to get to the point where you're like, I do not know if this character is going to die or not, and I really, really don't want this character to die, and I'm genuinely interested in their fate. Like, that is good filmmaking.
Yeah, I agree with that. So we get to the third act. They have their plan to kill Godzilla, and it's just great. Like, look, guys, we all been through war, but it's, we have to do this. If we don't, no one else will, kind of thing. And they all get together, and it's very inspiring. It's very like, you just want to salute these guys.
Yeah, it's sort of the call to arms and the call to action from ordinary citizens, and war veterans. It's a sort of, there's a problem and people need to rise up and solve it.
And so they come up with the idea to kind of sink Godzilla for the pressure to take him, and then to kind of lift him back up, and to depressurize him at the same time. But all the while, the main character has this plan to do the kamikaze thing.
Yeah.
And he doesn't tell anybody. Like, he kind of keeps it to himself a little bit. Mm-hmm. And he does this whole kamikaze thing, but he ends up calling back to the guy from the very beginning, the tech, the engineer, and he helps modify the plane to add bombs and to make it to where, he can do this kamikaze successfully right into Godzilla's mouth.
Yeah.
He talks about.
Yep.
So, we kind of have this multi-layered thing where you have the people you're cheering for to be able to do it, but it kind of sets up the fact that maybe we kind of already know that's not going to work out because you have him have this kamikaze plan.
Yeah, it's a great third act because it's this plan where they're going to essentially try to sink Godzilla rapidly to crush him from the rapid
the pressure
depth. The pressure from the depth. And if that doesn't work, they're going to rapidly lift him back to the surface using these inflatable balloons, essentially. And so then they're hoping that the rapid decompression will give him like a super case of the bends or whatever, and just so that like the massive pressure, then the depressure will just like rip him apart and he won't be able to survive all of it.
Right.
And of course Godzilla does survive all of it. And the sort of failsafe that our main character cooks up is that he's going to turn his plane that he's piloting into a kamikaze bomber and fly it right into Godzilla's mouth and blow him up from the inside, because
that's what he was meant to do this whole time.
Yeah,
his war has been going on. His war isn't over. He mentions that, like, this war isn't over for me, because he never did.
He was
what
always
supposed
labeled as failing his mission, and so and they have precedent that Godzilla's vulnerable from inside, because when they blew him up from inside his mouth with the mine earlier, it was a more damaging blow. So he thinks that if we blow up his whole head from the inside, that won't heal back.
Right. So you have this incredible sequence. The music, it's all coming like it's a crescendo of just awesome.
We talk about like well-staged climaxes and like
Yes.
building up to the climactic moment. And there's been like videos, essays about how the original Star Wars has one of the most well put together, climactic moments of a third act. And there's, we can talk about the third act of Signs. I think that this is going to be one of those where it's like you could do a video essay about all of the pieces coming together to like build this perfect climactic moment where you get the sort of physical and thematic payoff all kind of in the shortest period of time. It's truly exceptional.
Right. So the plan doesn't really go that perfect. So our main character does decide to kamikaze into Godzilla's mouth, but we, have a little flashback to where, and this worked really well for me in
Yes.
that it's not a flashback to reveal what our guy did, because it sets it up in such a way where the tech who is modifying his plane says, oh, and there's one more thing, and then the scene cuts. So you're like,
Yes.
oh, obviously he's putting in an ejection
as
seat.
soon as we saw that, we leaned over each other. We was like ejection seat. And plus, I mean, we're observant guys. We're always looking for payoffs and
Yeah.
We'll lean over to each other sometimes during movies and be like, "That's some foreshadowing."
Well, and plus they make it a point to mention earlier that there's never ejector
they
seats.
talk about that all the pilots in kamikaze pilots didn't even have ejector seats. So it's like they added one in for this one, and so you cut to the flashback which this is the same tech that was with him on the island that caught him being a failed kamikaze pilot and then completely hated him for failing to help save his men. And so like if there's anyone that wants this guy to die more than anyone else, it should be this tech guy.
But
for the plane.
you have one of the more like kind of, I don't want to use the word beautiful per se,
It's a touching moment.
but a very touching moment where the tech is like, he hears the main character's words about actually wanting to live now for Kiko, I believe is
Akiko, yeah,
Akiko
his daughter,
is
yeah,
the daughter
his
character.
adopted daughter, yeah.
And actually wanting to live now, but knowing that he still has to do his duty. So then it flashes back to right after he flies the plane into Godzilla's mouth, and then it sees that, he does this. Here's the ejection seat, but then it goes into the better moment where he's like, "You need to live."
Yeah, he leans into him and he says, "Live." It is the kind of moment it's a touching moment. It's one man that sort of has all the reasons in the world to want this guy to die and convince this guy to do this kamikaze attack. And he's like, look, there's an ejector seat. You need to live for the future. If there's a line in the film that or a line about the film that sort of sums up what it's about, like live for the future, live for the next generation, rebuild, be a survivor.
It's almost like,
who
look,
can help make it better.
we don't need to die for our country anymore. We need to live for our country.
A line from a certain video game that I love is this war has enough dead heroes.
Right.
Simple as that.
Yeah. So the mission is a success. Godzilla's taken out. It's very cool. Everybody does this salute to, and at first it looked like the salute was to Godzilla, but I believe it was actually to the main character.
I think they were saluting the pilot, but like also maybe like, look, Godzilla is just a creature and they killed it. So maybe just, saluting the battle, the honor, the fallen creature, so to speak.
So everybody gets home. It's all amazing. It's happy. And then the neighbor, the female who kind of plays like the aunt character or aunt character, if you will, she
comes running up with little
with a note,
Akiko
with
and
a telegram.
Note. Yep, a telegram.
And come to find out that the mother character, Noriko, survived.
Yeah.
She survived the Godzilla attack.
You get the
and is in
beautiful moment
hospital.
where he's running into the next town over and he's climbing the stairs and he goes into the hospital room and she's all bandaged up and banged up, but she's alive. And so you have the family united there, finally properly becoming a family.
And it's incredibly emotional. Like
it's without a doubt sappy, but like sappy hits when it's done right and it's done totally right.
Yeah, you could call it emotionally manipulative if you want, but it works because
it lands.
Everybody in the theater, including my wife,
choked back to tears.
Yeah, and the guy next to her was sobbing.
Yeah.
Even our second time, I was tearing up.
Yeah.
It's a good moment for sure. So, and then we're hit with, I think, a classic Godzilla trope, but this one's a little different here. The camera shows the side of Noriko's neck, and there seems to be some kind of, I will say, infection.
It appears
rising
to look
up
like
her
some
neck.
kind of infection traveling her neck, so to sort of imply that she's been somehow received some kind of poison from Godzilla, some kind of radiation sickness or
And it doesn't seem like
infection
right,
from
right.
what happened. And it doesn't look like it's like a creature in there or anything weird like that, but like
It's
ambiguous.
ambiguous.
And it doesn't really say fatal or not, but it did look like it was traveling kind of fast or spreading kind of fast. So it's like, who knows?
And then it immediately cuts to
A chunk of Godzilla
sinking in the ocean, and then it starts to regenerate. Then your classic theme kicks in.
theme, which is your vintage sequel hook. When Godzilla dies in one of these movies, he's not allowed to really be dead. I think that's also one of those Toho stipulations.
It's in
like
the contract.
only they let Godzilla, like they decide if Godzilla ever dies, and like anytime they let anyone make a movie, they're like, you can't kill Godzilla. And I think the closest they let you do is like, you can kill him, but then like you got to show he's coming back at the end. So.
Right. Yeah, and another one, he's got to have 3 rows of dorsal plates. He can't eat anybody.
Yeah, is there?
And he can't
Do
be
they have the
killed.
rows on the toe count now? Is it 3 toes or 4 toes or something like that? There's some strange ones, but like, they got to protect the character. They're very specific about protecting the image of Godzilla.
So, after watching this the second time, I'm really confident in saying, and I'm not going to include the MonsterVerse here for a second because that's its own thing.
Yeah.
Sure, you could say, "Oh, that's a Godzilla movie."
And
Jesse,
it's a different,
aren't you going to
and it's a
include
different
that?
style.
I gotta say, this is top 3, probably top 2, and I'm not going to be one of those guys who says, "Oh, well, it's never going to be better than the original."
Here's the thing:
I don't rewatch the original.
The more I think about it, I think I would carefully say, like, look, I've been one of those people that have put the original at the top for a long time. Not necessarily my most rewatched Godzilla movie, but like every time I watch it, I'm like, oh yeah, like, I kind of have the thing where it's like, well, those are all Godzilla movies, but like this is a real film. Like, and I don't try to be pretentious like that, but it's like that original Godzilla, like it has some genuine meat on the bones and it has a lot going on. It didn't have any, it wasn't coming in with any of the franchise baggage or anything like that. It was just a film. For all they knew, they would make one movie and they were never going to make anything again. It was going to fail miserably, but they were doing something with that. This is one that is like, look, I would never even put Shin Godzilla above the original. I would always put it up there with it or just below it. But like this one, like, again, recency bias, whatever. But it's like, I think over time, I will begin to say that this one is above the original for me because it hits in the same kind of emotional, this is a real film kind of way.
It is more rewatchable.
And it has the advantage of being a movie in 2023, so it has all the natural advantages over a movie from 54, and it hits in the same kind of power and emotion and themes as the original does.
Yeah, I agree. Right now, it is for sure like the top 2. It probably will be better for me.
And I love Shin, but like,
it's better than Shin.
I think it's a stronger film than
it's
Shin.
very different too. It's kind of apples and oranges.
There's a lot of stuff that Shin does really, really well that it's like, the people that are like, Shin's not a real Godzilla movie, I'm like, dude, that is so good. It's so much a Godzilla movie, it's not even funny. And it checks all the boxes, so to speak, or most of them. But it's like, this is just, and again, maybe I'm a sucker for more emotional storytelling. Maybe I'm a sucker for sort of human heroism and sacrifice and like sinking characters low and bringing them high and getting the happy ending. It seemed like for a long stretch of time the bittersweet ending was almost the best you could get in a lot of movies. Like, oh, if the hero dies, or if he lives but he's lost his loved one, or if he lives but he's lost his kid, or like he lives but his best friends die. Something like, it always feels like you're not really ever allowed to get like the proper like earned happy ending. It seemed like anytime a movie would build up that there was going to be some kind of big, costly, heroic sacrifice, something would happen, and it would play out that way, and there would be a cost. It's like, it's nice to see a movie that puts characters through the challenge, and you think like, oh my god, like they've been through so much, it might not all work out. I really want it to work out, and then it does work out, and it doesn't have to come at the cost of self-sacrifice. It's a genuine happy ending.
So we talked about after we saw it that this movie, if we had to take other movies and combine them to give you the
what are the ingredients,
the feel and the tone and the
I think
story,
we came down to 3 Godzilla movies and 3 non-Godzilla movies, I think.
Yeah, so I think Godzilla
54.
54.
Yep.
Then you have Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah,
GMK. Yep.
Then what was the other one as far as the Godzilla movies?
G14.
Godzilla 2014.
Yeah. Those are the 3 sort of aesthetic inspirations for it on the Godzilla front.
And then Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, Top Gun Maverick, Jaws, and Dunkirk.
And Dunkirk.
Yeah, and it's weird. Like, you think, like, what? Like, Godzilla 54, GMK, Godzilla 2014, and then Dunkirk, Jaws, and Top Gun Maverick. But it's like when you see the movie,
aesthetically, especially Dunkirk.
Yes,
you know,
in terms of
that's
like
a weird
even the
thing to say.
cinematography was very like every time they're on the ocean, I'm like it just feels very Dunkirkish.
And the music.
Yeah, like it's not purely like oh they're in the water, it's Dunkirk or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it's like no, it's like it feels like that. You know.
Yeah. Well.
And the third act is some Top Gun Maverick stuff.
It
It's
is
that
so
sort of
Top Gun Maverick.
human overcoming crazy odds, and
You think they're going to die, but they all live.
yeah, and it's inspiring. You know, I don't like to call movies inspiring, but it's inspiring kind of storytelling, and it's like it's totally got
Well,
that.
and the doctor character says none of us are allowed to die, or something to that effect, before they go on the mission.
Yeah, he
and
talks
in
about
fact,
like
nobody dies.
This is a war being waged to save life for the future, or something to that effect.
Yeah, and nobody dies in the,
Yeah.
in the final act against Godzilla, which is super.
It's very encouraging.
It's,
you know,
it's cool.
It's like one of those things where it's like you know stuff is cyclical, and I think you know the sort of textbook Hollywood ending, as they say, was so out of style for a long time, and the end thing was like, well, someone's got to die, something's got to be not happy, someone's got to sacrifice. Then the audiences kind of got beat up by like downer endings of various degree and bittersweet endings of various degree. That it's like now like a sort of movie that if it earns the happy ending, it just is that much more cathartic for audiences. Like you just feel like, you know, you see the response that Top Gun Maverick had at the box office, and it's like clearly that's giving audiences something there's a yearning for, and it's like yeah,
Right.
people want an earned happy ending, you know, where
and
things can work out, but it doesn't feel cheap.
Right, and it is very much like that. I have to say, as a diehard Godzilla fan, and for other Godzilla fans, it's a 10 out of 10 experience.
Yeah,
It might even be a
buff.
10 out of 10 film.
Yeah, and a film buff. I follow Jeremy Johns is one of my guys on YouTube that I follow a lot. Shout out to Jeremy Johns, he's awesome. But like he did his review, and he's like I'm like very much like not a super Godzilla guy. Like he's like I've watched like a lot of the new stuff and whatnot. He's like but like this was like sung its praises. And I was very happy to see that. I tend to agree with him more often than not.
Yeah, this is one of those Godzilla movies where I think this is a good entry point for people who are not fans of the franchise. Like, you know, when you say, "Oh, let's watch this Godzilla movie," and they cringe a little bit. No.
Yeah.
Take a chance on this one. Let this be your entry point. If not the MonsterVerse, let it be this one.
Yeah, here's the thing. Like, I would be hesitant to show my dad something like Shin Godzilla because I think it would be a little weird for him to get
Very
into.
talky, political.
But I would show my dad this movie,
Yes.
and I feel like my dad would come away really.
Well,
digging
again, you know, my wife went with us this time, and
Yep.
you know, she's not super into Godzilla, and this is also a Japanese film, so it's subtitled.
Yep.
So, and it's not a lot of subtitles. It's not hard reading by any means.
Yeah.
Not compared to Shin Godzilla.
Shin Godzilla is
which
one of the wordiest Godzilla movies there is. Fast talking exposition.
And she was in tears at the end, you know, and she was very moved, and she liked it a lot. So
Yeah.
overall, it's a 10 out of 10 for me. I'm not even gonna. We've seen it twice now.
Yep.
10 out of 10.
Yeah, it's a 10 out of 10. Yep, it checks the boxes. It checks all my boxes. It's what I wanted, what I needed. You know, it's like what big complaints or improvements do I have to lobby at this movie? It's like I don't really have
There's
any. You
not
know, it's
really
like
any.
this thing is what it is, and what it is awesome,
for
and
it-
it's
for
great
its-
at being what it is.
And for its budget, I said this in the spoiler-free -1 episode. Shame on Hollywood, and I'm
Yeah.
going to keep saying that.
Exactly.
And I know 15 million is a lot for a Japanese production.
Yes.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
But when you see what they can do with their water simulation VFX and everything else in this
Yeah.
movie, and the weight behind everything, and
It's-
the
it speaks to the excesses of how Hollywood operates.
Yeah.
An executive, a co-executive, a supervisor, an area director, a this, a that, the other. These insanely sized, you know, over the top pricings for everything. Like clearly there's an issue with the Hollywood system that like if everything has to be a $200 million budget to be a blockbuster, clearly there's systemic problems. Because like we're getting amazing visuals like this. Like, hey, maybe the visual effects artists need to be prioritized more in terms of their wants, their needs, their money, and maybe the scheduling needs to be proper, and you need to actually prepare movies and have proper pre-production. Because here's the thing, they made this movie over the course of a long period of time. This thing wasn't rushed out. This thing was done filming like I think like a year and a half ago or something like that. Like they probably did a very clear, strict preparation, very tight script, shot what they shot, got the edit locked in, and said these are the visual effects we need, and now we're going to work on this for a year or two, and fine-tuned it. It's like that's a normal production cycle, not this like overspending an extra $50 million in overtime to scramble and redo 500 shots at the last second kind of nonsense.
The day before release, or week before release.
Yeah, exactly.
Editing VFX.
Yeah, it's like this.
It's not sustainable.
This chaotic thing that they're doing. They're just you know, someone said once, they're like, every time you see something CGI on the screen, it's just money flying through a printer. They're like, and you do 50 versions of a shot that it's like you know, you don't want to say it's a throwaway shot, but it's like you got 50, 60, 70 iterations of a shot that's just an establishing shot of a base or something. It's like, why, like, Hollywood, what are you doing? What are you doing? Find all these shots. There's, you know, you don't need to put these things through this meat grinder over and over and over again and just waste money because you've got it, you know?
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. So I think that's probably going to wrap it up for this episode. It's kind of a beefy episode where we're sitting here right here at 2 hours, including our -1 review, our spoiler review here.
It'll be broken up into smaller bites for everyone to pick on the topics they prefer.
Yeah, and I'm going to try to put in the time stamps here and there so you can kind of pick what you want and what you don't want. But this is our episode 0, our ground zero episode, so to speak.
Yeah,
so
we get an overall flavor of our style, of our tastes and wants, needs, and desires as far as cinema goes and how we view it.
So moving forward, I think from now on, things will be definitely more structured as far as like, okay, let's talk about our top 10 lists of this. Let's talk about this, news, that, whatever.
Yeah.
But again,
all kinds of fun ranking discussions, because that's where you can get into some fun nitty gritties of talking about a lot of movies. Of, you know, I like to go in terms of like franchises are fun to rank, but also like director by director, like how do you rate his filmography? How do you rate that filmography?
Yeah.
You know, those are always fun discussions.
We'll do that. So again, we're trying to drop episodes every Monday now. Follow us at the Film Jump on X, formerly known as Twitter. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate you. We are the Film Jump. And again, my name was Jesse.
Yep. I'm Chris. Happy to have you guys.
Yep. And we'll talk to you soon.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are tonight's entertainment.
You are not in Kansas anymore. You are on Pandora.
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.